If Brad shows up, I'll put that.
A new mayor.
All right. So, help me identify, what's a quorum for this one? 6? 7. Got 8. 6 and a third makes
Hey,
it
how
7.
much you counting me for?
You're the
Who's the
third.
third?
Just keep your arm on the table.
You're the
Is this
third.
by population now too?
That means between me and you, we're like a half. All right, well, welcome everyone. Good morning. This is the September 10th monthly board meeting of the PPACG board. Call ourselves to order. Rob informs me we do have a quorum, so we can move on with the business of the day. We do like to start with introductions, so I'll just kind of keep talking until Councilman Pico is ready to introduce himself.
Andy Pico, Colorado Springs.
Good morning, Norm Steen, Teller County Commissioner.
Don Knight, Colorado Springs.
Neil Levy, Woodland Park.
Mark Coy, Vice Commander, Shreveport Air Force Base, and I'd like to introduce Colonel Steve Slade. He's the IMA or augmentee to the commander of the 50th Space Wing.
Jeff Bond with 21st Space Wing at Peterson Air Force Base.
Mark Dwallaby, Park County Commissioner.
Doug Lawler, CDOT Region 2, filling in for Karen Rowe.
Keith McCafferty, Mayor Town of Raymond.
Jill Gabler, Colorado Springs City Council.
Gerald Blaine, El Paso County Commissioner.
Rob McDonald, PPACG.
And I'm Mark Snyder, the first vice chair and the mayor of Manitou Springs, filling in for Dennis Heisey today. And in the back row,
Rich Muzzy, Pikes Peak Area Council of Governments Environmental Program.
Barbara Ricas, Pikes Peak Area Council of Governments Office Resources Manager. Beverly Mayeski, Finance Director.
Craig Casper, Transportation Director.
great. We usually do the audience too, don't we?
Yep.
So, would you start us off? Okay.
Bob Baker, Cat.
Deborah Perkins Smith, CDOT.
Deb Sudmeyer, CDOT.
Marie Sabata, CDOT.
Mark Andrews, CDOT. Shane Ferguson, CDOT.
Wendy Pettit, CDOT Region 2. Lisa Streisfeld, CDOT Region 2. Jennifer Urban, El Paso County.
Wow. Crazy guy. You get by. She's wonderful.
Hi, good morning. Mark Denreader, Teller County Commissioner.
Running for election.
Great. Thank you all very much. Welcome.
He talks about more.
We have, next item is agenda approval. Does anybody have any changes or suggestions for the agenda? If not, the chair would entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
So move.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes unanimously. Thank you. Item 3 is public comment. And we have a kind of an honor today to bestow. PPACG staff recognition. Apparently, Rob McDonald has been with this organization for 15 years now. Huh?
Very short years. I noticed there's a cake.
I saw that over there, and I didn't know exactly what the procedure would be for digging into that cake.
I would say eat at will.
Eat at will. So if anybody wants to get a piece, just get up and get it, or are we going to serve it?
It is, yes. Yeah, we hope so.
So if you need to get that early sugar buzz, then feel free to be the first to cut into that cake. But Rob, I've actually been hanging around here now for 8 years, I think it is, or maybe even longer. Started out as Marcy Morrison's backup.
Remember?
And I can remember just how clueless I was when I first came to this organization. All these acronyms flying around and these different pots of money and STIPs and TIPS and all that. And you were the one that helped me to finally get a grasp on that. And, here it is, 9 years later, still working on getting that total knowledge. But I'm really glad that somebody seems to have a complete mastery of all of this. And I know you have a lot of great people like Craig and Rich who work with you and help you to get that. But you have been the keeper of the knowledge for us for at least my entire tenure here. So, I think 15 years, that's got to be, about half your life that you've been working here?
Sure, I'll take that. Thank you. Yes.
I think, yeah, it's on the cake, too. I'm only 32, right?
There you go. It's a remarkable job you're doing for
Again.
somebody who started it as a teenager. So, but I didn't know if anybody else had any comments or thoughts they wanted to share concerning Rob's tenure here and his 15th anniversary. I think now would be the time if anybody has anything they want to contribute. Please, Commissioner.
You know, I've been around for a while, and I remember starting out, and he was very welcoming. You know, he will spend the extra time to make sure that you're comfortable with the organization, and I really I applaud that. You know, customer service is really his focus, and you've done a fantastic job, and I look forward to the next 15 years of working with you, right?
That sounds good.
Sounds good. Okay.
I'll just add a little bit here that diving into all the acronyms was quite the challenge, and it took me a little bit, and Rob helped me to understand all those. But coming to the realization that Dr. Cog was actually not a professor was one of those imminent moments.
I think we're on page 2 of the acronyms.
Page 2 of 43 to go.
Well, and you have a lot of different interests that you have to balance, and you do a great job with that. Please, Tyler.
I wouldn't want to miss the opportunity to recognize the 15 years of service here at PPACG, and particularly your professionalism that you brought here and the changes that you've brought to this organization. As you can remember, there was a different climate here, and it's much, much better here, and I appreciate that, and I think it's really brought a real tone of regionalism and cooperation, and really elevated this organization to a higher level. So I look forward to the next 30 years.
Yeah, thank you. I think you've been here most of the time back and forth as mayor, and I remember meeting you for the first time when you were chair of the Clean Air Campaign.
Yep.
That's going back.
AQTC vice chair or something, or chair.
Quality Technical Committee.
Yep.
We've had them all. But I think, it's been really great, and I was talking to Mayor Snyder earlier, and, you know, the PPRTA, we kind of hatched and launched that, you know, within that 15 years. It was a couple years ahead of time, and then we're coming into our 10th year. So it's been amazing to see that really grow and mature into what it is, a pretty great success. Thank you. The other one is, you know, really our area agency and aging. We've doubled the senior services we deliver through the board to all the programs that we've really done. And this lower level, when I started, was full of City of Colorado Springs, insurance and risk people. And they left, and eventually we reclaimed the lower level after a couple of years. And so it's been great personally to see the agency grow, the board. You've all done what, $1 billion worth of things out into the community, and services and projects, and getting them all set up. So it's been great to look back at that. Some of you were here for our 40th anniversary 7 years ago. It was really great to look back at everything the agency has done in those first 40 years, now 47 years. I'm glad I could be a part of it. Filled some pretty big shoes when I got here, and look forward to continuing that. So thank you to the board and certainly the staff. Already been recognized. They do all the heavy lifting. I just get out of their way sometimes. But good to hear the kind words. Thank you.
Well, you know, I always think an organization is only as good as its leader, and I think you guys do a fabulous job here. A lot of balancing to do. CDOT seems to be a kind of a moving target sometimes with funding. I think we're going to hear today about yet a new iteration of the way CDOT intends to allocate out their funds. But I think you guys do a great job of keeping us in the loop and in keeping us our projects and our needs, trying to forecast, you know, what we're going to need 5-10 years from now and how we're going to get there. And I think that's been your leadership that's been so successful. So if there's,
on
please.
the transportation level, the leadership from PPACG has been incredible, and the access to the CDOT folks. When we got shifted from Region 1 to Region 2, I was nervous about it at first until I realized it was going to be the same folks that I deal with at PPACG, and so it's been a very responsive organization. It works well with the smaller members that are out in the outskirts, and you still paid attention to us, and I appreciate everything. You know, I did a lot of complaining until I was at the meeting where I realized how much we pay and how much we get, and that's, you know, I still complain, so. But thank you, Rob.
I call it advocate.
Thank you.
Well, with that, then I guess that we can go ahead. We have, as Rob mentioned, we do have a cake over there, and we also have a nice little plaque here from the Pikes Peak Area of Council of Governments. And
I think we're doing
Andy,
a
did you-
photo.
yeah, we might as well. Where's our? There we go.
Seems like we're missing one person.
Photographer in the
Usually
house.
stands between us.
Andy, do you want to join us, or? It always looks good. Why don't you get in the middle, Rob, since you're the man of the hour, and this is presented to Robert McDonald in recognition of 15 years of dedicated service and performance since August 2nd, 1999. So, why don't you hold that?
We'll do the photo.
Get a photo. Thank you, and congratulations. Okay. So, that leads us to item 3B. Is anybody wishing to make public comment today on items not on the agenda? It's an opportunity to speak to the board about something that is not. Victoria, you seem to be ready to go.
I do have some very exciting news I would like to share with the board today. I'm Victoria Chavez. I'm from El Paso County. And yesterday, it was announced that we have received a Tiger Grant.
Oh, wow.
So shocking. We've been trying for quite some time to figure out how we were going to fund some improvements to Charter Oak Ranch Road in support of Gate 19 at Fort Carson. We received $1.2 million to do planning and environmental clearances, get some designs, and get that project shovel-ready. So I want to, first of all, just let me go through my very long list of support letters and the people who have helped us get this project going. We had support letters from Representatives Tipton and Lamborn, from Senator Udall, from Fort Carson, from CDOT, from Don Hunt, so thank you, our CDOT partners, from the City of Fountain, and from the Central Front Range. I also want to thank all of our commissioners who worked so hard to put together at least 3 different resolutions in support of this project, and to thank our county administrator, Jeff Green, and my 2 bosses, Andre Bracken and Jim Reed. Without the support of all of those people, we could not have done it. I also want to give a nod of acknowledgement to PPACG, who did some great military planning with some of the grants that they had received, and I literally stole a lot of data from those to put into the grant application. So thank you, PPACG staff, for all the work that you've done, too. So, again, $1.2 million to do some work at Charter Oak Ranch Road and hopefully support our military partners at Fort Carson.
Congratulations. That's great news.
Thank you.
Anybody else wishing to speak under public comment? Okay, seeing and hearing no one, we can then move on to item 4, the consent items, which are usually taken as a whole by the board unless somebody wishes to pull one for special consideration. Does anybody wish to do so today? And a motion concerning the consent calendar would be in order.
So moved. Second.
Move for approval and second. Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? That passes unanimously. Thank you. And we can then move on to item 5, which is reports, and we'll start with the Executive Director's report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a couple items. The report is in your packet. One of which, first one to talk about, you'll probably hear and see some advertising. We're getting ready to start year 2 of Connect for Health grant and navigation services we provide to the community of how to get into the Connect for Health system, the online insurance program that Colorado created, a year ago now. So I've been meeting with my staff to get that started. We'll be training this month and starts October 1st. So if you hear some of that, you'll know that's still us as part of that whole system. Also talked to, a lot of you joined me. We were out at the State of the Wing at Peterson Air Force Base. We did that last week. It was interesting to see you all, and I saw the #1 community project they highlighted to have some action on was widening Powers Boulevard. And we're working still hard on getting funding for that. We hope to have some news out of CDOT in the next month on that very project. Craig and I also joined the county hearing process, as we used to call it. CDOT, and they call it the 4P process now. Joined Commissioner Les Gruen to Teller County's version, but also El Paso County's version to hear the update from CDOT, their staffing, the programs, resource allocation, and a whole list of things that they present to the counties and the local governments that attend those county hearings, as we still call them. And then finally, I met with the incoming Public Works Director for City of Colorado Springs, Travis Easton. Used to sit where Doug is right now, but he's now coming in, and we'll have some interesting discussions, I think, going forward. As Public Works for Colorado Springs will change with his leadership, so we look forward to that. I'll leave it at that. Any other questions? Be happy to take.
No questions, but I wanted to follow up. I think that's a great hire. Congratulations to the City of Colorado Springs for bringing in Travis. And I think that, as you pointed out, having sat on this board, having a good working knowledge of PPACG, I expect great collaboration between the City of Colorado Springs and PPACG, and I'm really excited for that.
Should be good.
I guess he starts October 1, did I read?
October 1.
Right.
City staff knows different.
Thank you. Rob, any questions for Rob on the Executive Director report? And we can move on to item 5B, which is the TAC, the Transportation Advisory Committee. And I'm not sure who, there we go. Jennifer, okay.
Good morning. Jennifer Irvin, TAC Chair. Good morning, Mr. Chair and Board. This month we had a couple of action items, and they are on your consent item today. The Unified Work Program, which we unanimously supported, and then also the TIP, which we unanimously supported. And then we had a discussion on the project scoring, and you'll have a presentation today by staff in regards to that. And so we are continuing to work on that with PPACG staff and had a workshop here within the last week. So expect that we'll have some action items at our next TAC in regards to that. We also had 2 presentations from CDOT, and I just wanted to thank Jeff and Maria for coming down and making those presentations today. They're going to make the same presentations to you, and I'd just like to say that we really appreciate them. With all the changes that are going to be happening here over the next couple years, it's really helpful to have them make that specific presentation to us and make sure that we get off on the right track. Change is always hard, but we're trying to make sure that we support that as well. And then the last item is the transportation voting representative. We had a discussion item on that. There was no action. That was not an action item for us, but I do see that you have it as an action item for you today. We just had a discussion. There was no consensus or recommendation. We'll leave that one up to the board. And then our next meeting is Thursday, September 18th. If you have any questions, and if anything comes up during the rest of the meeting, I'll be here to answer that on behalf of what the TAC had at their last meeting.
Thank you. Any questions for Jennifer for the TAC?
Thank you.
Doesn't look like it. Thanks.
One thing I do want to add, our chair was Tom Casawara, and he has retired from the town of Monument.
Wow.
So we will be probably taking action at our next meeting in regards to a chair.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. And will we be recognizing Tom then for his service to the TAC?
We can. We know how to get a hold of him still.
Okay.
He hasn't gone off to Hawaii or somewhere.
Thank you. And that leads us to item number 5C, the Community Advisory Committee.
Bob Baker, chair of the CAC. Rob, this is one of the few times in your life that you can have your cake and eat it too.
I will
enjoy it. Our action items at our meeting were to review and recommend the site application for the Fort Carson lift station, And then we reviewed and recommended the tip amendment number 21. General information, we welcomed Welling Clark as our newest member representing Kono. We elected Alan Creeley to the position of second vice chair. We had a briefing on the CDOT program distribution by Jeff and Maria. It's on your agenda, so it was very much appreciated. Of particular interest to me was the risk-based cash management system that they have started to use relating to the cash that CDOT has. And I think the answer is that they will use it more efficiently through that process. We received a report on specialized transportation plan from Angel Bond. We received information concerning PPACG board public transportation representative. There was an opinion, that discussion, that the reason the city was responsible for 96% of the ridership was that the county's ridership was cut. Amen.
So, Bob, did you guys have a specific recommendation with regards to the public transportation voting representative, or?
Wasn't asked for.
Okay. Because I know we'll get to that here in a little bit, but there seemed to be a little bit of a difference of opinion on how we should fill that role. So I'm sure we'll take that up here in a little bit.
I don't think there was a quarrel with the discussion about the city representative.
Okay.
But for that one opinion.
Thank you. Any questions for the CAC, for Mr. Baker? Thank you again. Okay, we can move on then to item 5D, the Regional Advisory Council, the RAC.
I'll take that one.
Mr. Gamble's not with us today?
Phil Gamble is out ill. He didn't eat the cake. Guy Dutra's out ill. He did not eat the cake either.
Okay.
But as I do, I fill in for my program managers and reps as well. Most of the information is in the packet. A couple things to highlight for you. First, halfway down the Scott Bartlett, which you've heard his presentation on the long-term care ombudsman program, but he hadn't been back to the RAC for a while, so he provided them an update, which is always good to hear, and usually some good side stories that he can share. The bottom of page 1, the Innovation Coordination Grant, you'll be seeing that probably next month, if not the month after that. Part of our funding was made available for some of the existing providers of our Area Agency on Aging Services to say, what can you do with a little bit more money? And the little bit more money is up to $150,000. We've got at least, the number was in here, I think 5 or 6 proposals that came in. So the committee of the RAC is going through that. The RAC is going to go through that and have a recommendation to the board to say, we're going to allocate, if you agree, money to these existing programs to do some innovative, challenging type things. Stretch the money, that is always a good thing to do. So stay tuned for that. The last item they started talking about, as we're all finishing the long-range transportation plan, they're about to get started on their 4-year plan for how to look at and how to allocate prioritized senior services. So they call it a 4-year plan. They're going to do surveys. They're going to have public meetings. So you're going to hear a little bit about that starting in the next month or two. They should have their plan wrapped up first part of next year. So stay tuned for that. And so when you hear another 4-year plan, that's us. And it's been a while, just under 4 years since we've had that plan before the board. So stay tuned for that. With that, I will let the report stand as is.
I did have a question.
Yeah.
If memory serves, the state was able to provide $4 million more dollars, and of which we got about 400,000.
Yeah, a little over.
A little over. And is that the case again for 2015? Is there additional monies being proposed or discussed?
Yeah, the long-term plan was $4 million a year out of the state legislature for at least 3 years, but we're looking for 4 years. So they've done the first 2 years, and that money has come through our budget process. It'll come again in the current budget process. That $400,000 we get be allocated recommendation from the RAC to the board. We think another $400,000 from the the new 4 million should come again next year. But we always wait till the legislature adjourns before we say that 4 million is actually coming forward.
Very prudent.
And so the legislation, we think they're already talking about it. We think, and we saw the first gubernatorial debate, and senior issues was one of the top 4 topics they debated. So we're encouraged by that. We think that'll continue, and if we're real lucky, we'll get the 4th year of 4 million, and that translates into another 400 or so thousand for our programs that you'll see in our budget process.
So at least in the area of aging services, we're pretty much 10%.
We are, the formula is fairly straightforward. There's only 5 components. Population is a big component, but population of over 60 is the largest component, and that is growing.
Yes, it is.
So our share may go up over time as we age gracefully, past 60 anyway.
Thank you. Any questions for Rob on the Area Agency on Aging? No? Great. Thanks, Rob. So next is item FE, which is the Mobility Coordinating Committee, the MCC.
I don't see Gail either.
I don't either, so I didn't hear her introduce herself, so I guess that will fall to
I'm
you
back.
also. You're
I read all these. No, this one's interesting. They met the CASTA conference, for those who don't know that acronym, Colorado Association of Transit Agencies. They're meeting in Crested Butte, I think. I can't remember if that's the Blue Town or not. It may be the Blue Town for the last week, but Angel is up there with a lot of the other folks. Their item, which is not on your agenda today, is the change in their bylaws. You'll probably have that next month, so heads up on that. I don't think a major change, but change is enough that you all have to approve. They talked a lot of the training. They're really trying to get that regional coordination of all the specialized transportation services, and that was the majority of their meeting.
And the changes to their bylaws would be in furtherance of that, coordinating the...
Right. In coordination, it could be dealing with some of the membership, allowing different agencies to join that. But I don't have it in front of me, so I'll bring that next month.
Next month, great. Thank you. Any questions for Rob on the MCC? Nope. And we can move on to everybody's favorite committee, the AFCURE, the Arkansas Fountain Coalition for Urban River Evaluation.
I appreciate that, Mark. At the AFCURE meeting, we talked about the Colorado discharge permit system renewals for the wastewater treatment plants and some common issues and concerns we might have with regards to those renewals, such as temperature monitoring requirements, total nitrogen limits, and some other issues that might be of potential concern as we start to see those wastewater treatment plant discharge permits being renewed. There's also a presentation from Colorado Springs Utilities with regards to some E. coli sampling and analysis they're doing in some hot spots in our area, and that, of course, all feeds into the 319 grant that will be starting later on this year to go ahead and take a look at the water quality impaired segments in our watershed for E. coli. We went ahead and talked about the website that we're moving from PPACG that will have its own domain name, and we're getting information from the various agencies and organizations and getting that website off the ground. And we talked about budgets for 2015, always a fun topic. That was really the highlights for the after group. Any questions?
I did have one. So
Sure.
we have it down here at the end of the agenda, the Waters of the U.S. letter to the EPA, but that really started with your group, didn't it, or am I wrong on that?
It kind of started with everybody. We had a presentation to our group. I know some of the county commissioners had some issues and concerns regarding the waters of the U.S. Rob and I actually had a meeting along with the Chamber of Commerce. There was an EPA rep there, and we expressed some of our concerns at that meeting yesterday, and that letter to the EPA was sent out this week. So,
Good. Well, thanks for helping
Sure.
with that. It's been a tough one for me to stay on top of.
Yeah,
So
well,
I appreciate the county
it's-
commissioners taking the lead and your support of that. So.
yeah, it's 1,000 pages full of lots of information.
And did you gather from the EPA that it's not as dire as originally thought, or worse, or about the same?
My opinion was that there's a lot of issues and concerns that need to be resolved still. I think the EPA rep, when she heard from all of us, recognized that the EPA potentially needs to be a little bit more flexible in looking at the requirements. They're getting some common concerns and issues and feedback from people. So I think our concerns seem to resonate. What actually happens, that remains to be seen, I guess. But I mean, the concerns for our area in the arid west, I think there'll be a lot more impacts than in other areas.
Good. Thank you. Any questions for Rich on AFCURE? Anybody? No. Thank you.
Sure.
And then item F5G is Water Quality Management Committee, and I see you're staying right
Still
where
here.
you are. So,
I figure if kind of Rob took two, I'd take two. So, there's actually a lot of conflicting meetings that day. So that was the first time ever that we have not had a quorum for the Water Quality Management Committee. We did, however, discuss the Fort Carson lift station, and the reps from Fort Carson were there, and we went ahead and went through all the SARC comments, the Site Application Review Committee comments, and Fort Carson resolved all our issues and concerns. And although we couldn't recommend approval of it, no one had any issues with regards to having Fort Carson move forward on that. Provide an after update and CDPHE kind of, working groups and potential regulatory changes. That's it.
good. Since we've already approved the lift station,
Yeah.
we do appreciate you guys taking that up and giving
Sure.
us a summary of your favorable discussion on that. Any questions for Rich on this? Anybody? Nope. Thank you again. Now I guess you can take your usual seat. And we can move on to item 6. Action items A is the fiscal year 2015 PPACG draft member dues assessment. See, Beverly is already at the microphone.
Good morning. At the beginning of the budget process last year, the board requested that we begin the process a month earlier with a discussion concerning member dues. As you can see on the first page of my memo, dues have held steady, increasing 0% on average since 2008, while grant revenue and expenditures have increased 6%. And member dues are utilized to match grants. And we would be able and eligible to have the opportunity to apply for new grants or increase funding under current grants if we had additional matching funds. The attachments to the memo show the current $410,000 dues level, and then the next attachment is an increase of $10,000, and then an illustration of an increase of $15,000. And by looking at the three scenarios, you can see how an increase in dues would affect your local governments. You may recall a few years ago that $10,000 of the dues that you send to PPACG is a direct pass-through to the Colorado Springs Regional Business Alliance for the partial funding of a lobbyist position. So that's why my summary shows $400,000, but the dues level is $410,000 because 10,000 goes directly to them. So today, if you would review dues and make a recommendation and direct staff on which dues level to create a balanced budget to present to you next month.
So generally, $10,000 increase in dues would bring down how much more in grant money? Just a thumbnail.
Well, it depends on what the percentage is, but sometimes it's 10% and sometimes it's 20% matching.
I think I translated into, for 10,000, multiplied by 3 or 4.
3 or 4.
So it's, most of ours are 80-20% match, 70-30. But as you can see, we've got some 90 and 100% grants over the years that don't require any matching. Or we match it with state funds to federal. So Beverly does a masterful job of all the matches with the program managers. They say, hey, we got this grant. However, it needs a match. And we usually match it. The last matching money is the local dues. And so we bring this to you, as Beverly said, because the numbers you give back to us, we're going to send to your local governments in your budget process to say, here's the PPACG dues request, here's the current amount, here's the increase. Generally, we look for some of those grants that we can just pull more down. I think every year we usually leave on the table, Craig's dismay, in the transportation program, $200,000 or $300,000 in federal dollars we can't pull down. And at a 20% match, that's $40,000 to $60,000 that we can't match with other funds. We have had Sharp 2 grants that have been 100%, so we've been able to leverage that. But typically, we leave at least $200,000 of federal dollars on the table, which has been okay. But as the board requested last year, you all wanted to talk about it in September before your budgets are starting to formulate. Because if we're off budget cycle with you all and we have a dues request, it's hard for you all, 16 of you, to go into your budgets mid-year and say, hey, we need another $50,000 or our share of $50,000. So the board, we agree, we wanted to come back earlier to talk about it. So whatever number you tell us, we will send back out with the charts as Beverly has provided.
So basically what you've given us here are 3 options: stay the same, increase 10,000, or increase 15,000.
Correct.
Yeah, well, those are the total numbers. And I seem to remember it's 2 or 3 years ago, during difficult economic times, I know, but I made an impassioned plea that we needed to increase our dues to pull down so many more of these federal dollars and bring grant monies into our region. And I was able to persuade some of the board members, I think, or maybe they made their own decision, but for one brief shining month there, we had increased our dues, but the next month it all got peeled back. And I guess upon reflection, several of the board members had a change of heart on that. Of course, that was, like I said, in a very difficult economic time. I know the city of Colorado Springs, all of us were really struggling to balance our budgets and see what we could do. But given that times are better now, budgets are healthier, I would make the case that we consider an increase. That's really easy for me to say because we're talking, $38 for Manitou Springs or maybe $60. Part of that is because our percentage of population has gone down relative to some of the certainly the unincorporated counties, some of the other Fountain, other areas that have grown leaps and bounds. So it's real easy for me to sit here and say, hey, let's increase the dues, But I'd like to hear from some of the larger entities who have a little bit more of a fiscal skin in the game, shall we say, and maybe hear what your thoughts are. Maybe still we're not talking about a great deal of money. I think even for Colorado Springs, what we're looking at. 6,000, something like that. So, Don, please.
Well, I'll talk first. Rob, I don't remember the conversation, but we are already at the tail end of our budget cycle for 2015. The mayor has all but put it to bed, and he gives it to us on the 6th of October. And we have before Thanksgiving, we'll have voted on it twice. So on Veterans Day, we're doing our first vote on it. So we're already looking, $740 increase just because the populations have shifted. If we stay the same, it's over 5K. If we do, so a 10% increase is over 5K for Colorado Springs. I'm happy to have this conversation if you want to do 2016, but, for 2015, I think that should, personally, and as head of the budget committee for the city council, that ship has sailed.
Would it be helpful then to start even earlier with this for at least for Colorado Springs? Because
Well, we can start the conversation now if we want to do something for 2000, raise it 10 to 15,000 for 2016. It's by June that we as council, and I'm not quite sure, but I think this comes out of council funds. I'd have to go back and double check. Our budget submission to the mayor went in about June.
Wow. It really started early.
Yeah.
It was starting April,
This may be a good time to talk about next year then.
Be a good time if you want to do a 2016 increase. This would be a good time to talk about it, but for 2015, our
Okay.
budget is pretty much put to bed.
It's getting earlier and earlier.
I'll give just a little different tack. Yes, Councilmember Knight is right. We're at close to the end of our budget cycle. However, in looking at this, it is $5,000 to $6,000, and I think we've heard that the budget for this upcoming calendar year is going to be shrinking, and I think that in turn speaks to the need for more partnerships and to be working regionally to save money. And so I think we show that by continuing to invest in this organization, and it's really just not that much money. So I think it is a wise investment for us.
No, you.
Yeah.
Where are you pointing at?
Me.
Second vice chair.
Well, I appreciate all the arguments, and there's a very strong argument that says, we put this thing in and we're getting 3 and 4 back for every dollar put in. But the budgets are still under stress. They are not growing. And, we're not actually increasing our pie all that much, if any. So while I appreciate, the leverage that this does, I'm rather hesitant to support the idea that we're going to kick it up a notch.
Yeah, and again, board has to start talking about it. And I think for a Colorado Springs process and even the county, I know you all have markup sessions and all that. We were part of your first 3 years ago. We were part of it. I think the funding actually came from the mayor's office to city council. I think it's still there. We follow your budgets. We follow all your budgets to see how the stresses are of what all you have. So we understand that, but again, board, you asked us to come back, so we're here. Leveraging is absolutely what we're all about. As I said, the dues component of our budget is only 6%. And then that leverages on through all our programs to the tune of, I think last check was about $150 million that this board allocated to projects to be done across the region. And so it's pretty good for $410,000 dues to leverage $100+ million or $150 million. And then on the other side, we also run the PPRTA. That leverages, and that sends out, we hope, $150 million this year. And so, the leveraging of the grants is one thing. The budget operating cost is another, but it's that payback through all the programs that really benefit the region. And hopefully that'll continue. But as we said, we will bring back a balanced budget no matter what number you give us. And Beverly and I and the program managers continue to be creative and look for those grants that are tied to our programs. We don't chase grants just because there's grants out there. We don't have time for that. But if they're related to our Area Agency on Aging, Transportation, Environmental Services, we'll go get those. And as you all remember, we talked about the military planning program we had here for 5 years and $6 million worth of grants. We spun out board representation. The military installations are now on our board. I think Victoria, too, talked about, one of the outshoots of that military planning program was, what do we do about Gate 19? And so we offered, and she didn't have to steal all the data. We made sure she had it for the Tiger Grant. And so those are the types of programs that you all approve in our work program. Then we go find the money, and frankly, we don't care the color of the money, but we'll go balance the budget, and we'll bring that back to you in the next couple of months.
Commissioner Glenn?
Thank you. Well, from the county perspective, at least one of 5, Rob, where are you at in the process as far as communicating this to our staff? Because we're going to have our first hearing on September 23rd. And I don't know if they're just, because they're formulating their, through our budget committee process, those types of things, if they're counting on dues remaining flat, that's a concern. If they have anticipated a potential increase, then I would like to know from staff, okay, how much flexibility do we have? Where are we going to find the money? So I just, I don't know if I'm prepared to act on this today, because my first question to staff is going to be, what are we giving up in order to compensate for this? So I'm willing to have the discussion, but I would still need to go back through our normal budget process, and if we agree as a board to increase our dues, it's going to come from somewhere, and I don't know where that is, so I can't make a blind recommendation.
Sure. Yeah, and the way it works, as Beverly said, is we're asking for a number today, but as Mayor Schneider said, we've had different numbers over our budget process.
Right.
So tomorrow we will send out the number to the local government to say, here's the working number. It's same as last year, increased by 10,000, whatever it is, and then that'll go out to the local governments, their staffs, and it'll report back into your processes. Even though it may be too late for Colorado Springs, maybe it comes in as a public comment, but we'll send that number out tomorrow.
Still trying to
Well,
decide.
and I don't want to say that it's too late. It's just that I personally would not support acting on this today, because you're just, you're throwing a dart at the board. I think it's good to have the discussion, give the member entities the flexibility to talk about remaining flat or increasing, but then we need to go back through our budget departments and say, if we do this, where's it going to come from? And then the next meeting, we could probably act on that, but I can't give direction to act on that today.
Thank you. Commissioner Steen?
And from just one other county, we are near the end of our cycle, too. We start in April. We had our final balanced budget meeting at the staff level yesterday, so we are ready to go public in the next few weeks with the final number. So I would say for 2016, certainly. What I'm hearing, I guess, Mr. Chair, I would recommend that we leave the number for 0 increase this year net. Okay. And I would go aggressive on 2016 budget for an aggressive increase, so. Off of the budget. Yeah, I would suggest a $25,000 increase for 2016, but not for 2015.
Well, would, say, March or April be a good time to bring this up to get an official?
Now, I mean,
No? Okay.
if we want to shoot,
Please.
yeah, if we want to do what Norm was talking about, leave it 0 now and aggressively shoot for 2025, then let's do it, give us a month to go back in and look at our books, and, we can bring it up next month as to what the feasibility is in our 2016 budgets for that.
Sure.
Okay.
I think it's good. And I think you'll have your budget approved here in December, so we can maybe start January, February to say, here's what we're thinking for the next budget cycle, and give you all plenty of time to go back. So January, February, we can have that discussion at the board, so you all can go back.
We can have it in November, but January, February.
Please.
No, I think if, looking for 2016, I would start the conversation now and start putting it on the table as to what it is, so we can, long lead time. Yes, we're working on our current budget for 2015, but as you're hearing here, there's a lot of resistance to, diving into that at some point. Most of us, our work is already done in that respect. So I'd go 0 now and start working now towards, a long-term view of 2016 and see where that can come down. Because otherwise, I don't think we'll ever get there.
Right. And I think it's a good proposal. And I think the challenge we and you all have is the multiple fiscal years, federal, state, your local calendar, nonprofits, they all have different ones. So sometimes this board will allocate a TIP project to you all, and they'll give you $10 million in the city of Car Springs. So I know your staff struggle with, you have to come up with a $2 million, 20% match. So that's probably in your budgets now as an estimate. And so maybe we work our dues, which is tiny compared to that, with all those big project matches that the local governments have to put in their budgets right now. But it's hard to put in your budget because this board hasn't even allocated a $20 million project for the county or the city or Manitou, because I think that's part of the challenge too. You may get that TIP amendment next month that requires a local budget change. And so that flexibility, I think, is built into all your budget. So in agreement, we'll start our discussion on our dues piece, but we recognize that you have inputs to your budgets all the way through, and it's hard to do mid-year budget corrections if some federal money lands on our doorstep and we have to allocate it out. So we can start that discussion in our budget process, call it a different phase of it, to say dues for the next fiscal year.
Thank you. Commissioner Dwalby, I don't know if you wanted to speak. You seem to be already
I'm kind of speechless here, looking at my number. It drops no matter what, and I appreciate that. But at the same time, I get in these arguments with myself.
Who wins?
I asked those three questions. Does it need to be said? Does it need to be said now? And does it need to be said now by me? And I was sitting here quietly. So, well, it's penny wise and pound foolish to turn down a lot of money for a little money. And if you're going to give a few cents and get a few dollars, quit whining about the few cents. Like you said, the multi-million-dollar projects and so forth. And I think that no matter how you look at it, our transportation and our seniors are in dire straits now, and it looks to get worse in the future from what we've heard. And I understand, you might need that money to put in on this project or that project, but what this board does for the entire region is its scope is huge compared to what we're putting into it. So I'm not going to complain no matter how much you raise our in this case you've lowered it, but I'm not going to complain if you keep our dues the same or raise them a little. You do more for us than so much more than what we put in. I can't complain. And so I say go for the doing as much good as we can in this case.
Well, I think the arguments are well stated, towards the leveraging. I mean, there's no question that you're getting 3 for 1 back or 4 for 1 or whatever it is. And if we could take that to its logical extremes, I'd up at $1 million and come in with a whole lot. The fact is, we have to have a chance to go back and dig it through the budgets. I mean, all of our budgets are still under stress. So I think Commissioner Glenn's idea of tabling this for a month will allow us to go back, everybody to go back, verify what we've got in there. We do have to kind of work the current one, and I think we need to kind of take a look at this process to look for 2016, starting how we approach that. I mean, if you ask me today, I'm going to say 0 for next year and roll it into a larger increase the following year. But I think it's reasonable to let us all go back and take a look at that.
Well, thank you. And you're saying take a look at it for 2016, not for 2015? For 2015. Okay. And I applaud you all for your early budgeting process. It's a game in Manitou. We try to get as close to that drop-dead December 15 deadline as possible. And, of course, our sales tax is collected by the state. It's really hard sometimes to forecast too early for us. I won't even have July numbers for another couple of days here. And I think that's very reasonable. I appreciate all your comments. In Manitou, what we've done since I've been mayor, is we've created a little kind of discretionary spending line item. We put $5,000 in there for council for projects and things that come up throughout the year that we budgeted for. And it's proved to be very useful for us, whether it's being able to provide $1,000 for a free shuttle for a new event in Manitou, or things like these dues increases. That's worked well for us. I don't know if other entities do a similar type of thing. I know a lot of taxpayers like to see every dollar accounted for, but that little bit of wiggle room has made it kind of makes our elected official lives a little easier. So what I'm hearing is maybe a motion to postpone decision on this for a month and let the entities go back and everybody come back next month and make it a definitive determination whether we're going to look at zero or any of the increases. Does that seem to capture what we've been talking about? I know we had some talk already about just zero for now and then on to 2016, but I was hearing a little bit of thought that maybe there's an opportunity to go back to your budgeting employees and see if there's an opportunity to eke out a little extra money for 2015.
I'll make that motion.
Any further discussion? Please, Rob.
Just quick. Procedurally, some of the local governments aren't here. We'd still like to send out the baseline zero growth to the budget folks that we normally send it out to.
Okay.
So they can have something to compare what's in the current process. So we're not saying this is approved, we're just saying this is the working scenario. So you all, when you go back, they won't look at you like, what are you talking about?
Do you send out this whole?
We usually send out a notice to the CFOs and equivalents and some of you as well. Just say, here's the working scenario. So they can, because the assessed value has changed, so like it drops in Park County and goes up and down. We want to give the exact numbers to you and also your CFOs.
Good. That'll give the various bodies, elected bodies, to maybe have a little discussion and decide what direction they want to go.
The real number, not last year's number.
Right. So we have a motion and a second. If there's no further discussion, then please vote. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed? One nay recorded. Thank you. And we'll go. Well, that passes, and we'll revisit this next month.
So next month, I won't be presenting the budget like I normally would, but we have plenty of time at the November and December meeting, if that meets your approval.
You have the same December 15 deadline?
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Yes. So sometimes we approve the budget at the end in November anyway, so we're ahead of 1 month. So, okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all. Okay, then we can move on to item 6B, which is the fiscal year 2013 through 18 Transportation Improvement Program Amendment Number 21. It looks like we had unanimous recommendation for approval from both the CAC and the TAC.
Steal Ken's thunder.
Oh, sorry.
Good morning. I'm Ken Prather, PPACG Transportation Planner. CDOT budgeting and contracting procedures require project funds to be programmed in the current fiscal year, which for CDOT started July 1st. So they've submitted a request to move funds for 13 projects into 2015. TIP Amendment 21 is a simple, straightforward action that accomplishes this. Their request also highlighted the fact that these projects did not appear to have progressed in 2014. This has triggered a review of the projects based on PPACG's project delay policy. Initial results is that the projects have not been forgotten or overlooked, but they're caught up in CDOT's contracting and IGA process. We'll be finishing the review and bringing the results back to you next month, but that action is independent of today's request for an amendment approval. Are there any questions?
So, if I heard you correctly, then, we had 12 projects that really saw no activity in 2014. And so they're being rolled over into the 2015 budget. And we have that, if they go 2 years without any activity, doesn't that put them in jeopardy of the money being taken away?
That's the ultimate result or possibility of the project delay policy. But it does come before you after the first time that we noticed this, just to make everybody aware and start the process. But as I say, so far everybody is working on the projects, but there has been some issues with contracting.
At the CDOT level?
With CDOT, yes, sir.
So it's kind of a catch-22 situation then, in that we're being delayed and causing a little bit of concern with CDOT, and yet the real underlying reason for the delays may be the bottleneck at CDOT contracting.
Well, that's what we're trying to find out is there a commonality with the contracting procedure? Is there something because of their changes in their procedures that are going on that might be causing it? Because this has certainly not happened before.
Okay.
Not to this extent.
So we're looking to get some activity going on these projects in 2015, so as not even to make it a possibility that the money gets taken back.
And that's why we want to go ahead and move forward with this amendment. So the money is in 2015, and wherever they are in the contracting process, we're not going to hold it up.
Thank you. Councilman?
It looks like everything was rolled over, except there's one line down here for MMT Route 12. Project to be funded with local funds, so it was taken out? Or that's on page 1, attachment 4.
What funding category is that, sir?
Well, it's the last one on page 1, Amendment 4, TIP Amendment Information Form, and it's the 2016 TAP funds, MMT Route 12, and over at the end of it decreases it, project to be funded with local funds. So everything else rolled over, but this one looks like it was kicked back to local government to fund. I'm not sure if that was a decision by local government or it's a decision by CDOT to drop it or how. Cause everything else was a rollover, straightforward. But this one doesn't look like that unless I'm not reading that right, which is entirely possible.
There was, we had a workshop in April, and there have been several actions addressing funding shortages since then that was accomplished in prior amendments. I don't see that project on my table here.
Yeah, I think it's on the CDOT table. I think the local funding is PPRTA. So I think the project, the project will be done, just different funding source.
Yeah, that project has already been withdrawn in a prior amendment. With and the city of Colorado Springs was going to go after RTA funds to fund that. But the federal dollars were put back into the pool. The other project that was also handled kind of the same way, due for different reasons, though, was the monument project of putting in a roundabout. That project was also withdrawn, and those funds were put back in some of these shortages that were identified back in April. CDOT left that project in there so that it could be identified, but that action has already been accomplished by this board back in June.
Thank you. Any other questions for Ken or Rob? Did you have anything you wanted to add, or did
Nope.
Ken answer?
We got it.
Well, okay. Well, it seems I wish I was a better motivator, but I would urge everybody to get busy. Do what you can. I know if it's a CDOT issue, then maybe if there's some action needed from this board to try and get that process moving, I think that would be, something this board would consider. Otherwise, I guess it'd be up to the various entities to just plug away and get some work going, huh? Oh, please.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, if I can, I'll just, CDOT is addressing as aggressively as we can some of the contracting issues. The last year has been it has increased that workload due to the RAMP program, so it's really just been a workload issue more than anything, but also some procedures and working with the state controller on how we get those agreements through. And then, of course, with each of those local entities, when you have your attorneys come back and we want to debate on some of the language, sometimes that delays that process as well. But we're working to streamline that as well as we can.
Attorneys got to eat too. All All right, thank you for that clarification, and we'll look forward to getting the process a little more finely tuned here as we move into the end of the year and into 2015.
Sure.
Please.
Just a question. I know that the CDOT policy, proposed policy, is to group projects into multi-year program, 4-year staging area concept, and Craig, maybe you can help maybe clarify that just a bit. And I'm wondering if the PPACG policy of delay would need to be relooked in view of CDOT's proposal to group projects into multi-year for cash funding.
We actually did the grouping by multi-year for this tip, and then CDOT's IGA people couldn't deal with it, so we had to go back as part of that workshop and undo that multi-year grouping. We're still working with them on that, but the policy that we, PPACG, adopted is actually a federal requirement that the funds be used in the year they're programmed. So the policy that was adopted was the low bar of the federal desired policy requirement. Most MPOs have more aggressive policy on project delays.
Okay, so as we're going to have CDOT here talk in just a bit, but do you think that this delay policy that we have is going to be consistent with what CDOT is proposing?
Yeah, well, what will likely happen is we'll do some tip amendments quarterly. With the new tip you're going to hear about shortly, there'll be one tip amendment a year instead of monthly, potentially maybe up to 4 per year, not monthly anymore. And it will be just when projects are ready to go, there'll be a 4-year pot of funds. When projects are ready to go, we'll move those into that year, and the other ones will move back. So there'll be just an administrative type shifting of projects.
So we'll be going through this delay process every meeting because
No, it'll still just be August, September.
Got it. Okay.
So that's when we do it, because it's after this CDOT has closed out their fiscal year and before we get to the federal fiscal year.
Okay.
We've got this 3-month window that gives us some slack.
Just trying to sync up.
Oh,
Good. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Or is anybody inclined to move on proposed amendment number 21?
Move approval.
Motion's been made and seconded. Is there any further discussion? Well, then let's vote. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed? And that passes unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you.
Brings us to action item number 6C, which is Public Transportation Voting Representative on the PPACG Board. You're standing there, so I assume you're going to introduce this item for us.
Yes, I am. Good morning. As we've discussed the past couple of months, MAP 21 requires that every MPO that represents an urban area over 200,000 in population to have a voting member whose primary responsibility is to advocate for transit. We had discussed that here at the board, and we took it through the advisory committees. At TAC, there was sort of a general murmur that there's some logic to have the City of Colorado Springs City Council member be that representative, because the city's the designated representative of FTA funds, or designated recipient of FTA funds, and that they provide about 95-96% of the trips. At the CAC, there was more of an outspoken disagreement because they didn't feel the city adequately represented some of the rural areas of the Pikes Peak area. What we had to do is explain that the voting membership is for the designated urban area. It's not for the rural areas. So one potential concept that we've discussed is to have the City of Colorado Springs council member be the voting representative, but keep our existing Dr. Knoll, whose job on the board is to represent transit, to represent the areas outside of the urban area. Do sort of I guess, have your cake and eat it too. We'll have a voting representative that represents the urban area for transit, and we'll have another non-voting but who can speak with all of you about transit area representation or transit issues outside of the urban area. And knowing Dr. Knoll, I don't think he'll actually feel constrained to limit himself, but he will fully participate.
And you said this is a requirement, but isn't it really a strong suggestion, recommendation from the feds, or is it
No, it is a requirement.
It is
we
an
will lose our
actual
certification
requirement.
if we do not have a voting membership. What their strong suggestion is to have it be the general manager of the designated recipient, which would be Craig Blewett.
Right.
He has no interest in that, and it would be putting a non-elected official on our board, which would be very new for our board also. So,
well, is the mayor not an option?
The mayor of Colorado Springs, that would require a change in PPACG and I forget the term.
Oh, right, we'd have to go to all the
Articles of Association and bylaws.
Certainly could.
But interesting, this requirement is going to require 12 states to change their state laws, because in some states, how the MPO's board elected or voting members are appointed are a matter of state law. So 12 states have to go back now and redo their state laws to meet this requirement. So.
Well, I welcome having one of our existing Colorado Springs members fill this role, and we're pretty confident that meets with the federal guidelines.
We've talked with Larry Squires, who's the FTA representative for area, and they said, well, it's not the ideal. They will have no comment on it. If that's what our area region chooses to do, they will accept it and move on.
And I certainly understand the tax concerns. I mean, it was kind of a revelation to me years ago when I found out that the RTA transit dollars go directly to Mountain Metro.
Yep.
And it wasn't up to any of the member entities to pull out their transit dollars, wasn't even an option. So, so I think having a counselor represent that public transportation, I think, fits for me. But I also like the idea of keeping Dr. Null or someone similar there to advocate, more strictly just for public transportation in general and for the region.
And one of the CAC, the gentleman on the CAC who had the strongest opinion was that most of the funds that are not federal that go to Mountain Metro Transit come from the PPRTA.
Right.
And that the city didn't necessarily represent the PPRTA's views, but
that's a whole
but the
other
city still, that's a whole completely, that's a big can of worms.
We'll deal with the federal requirement first.
Right, knock them down, the easy, low-hanging fruit, so to speak. So any questions or thoughts from the board members? Did I see somebody in the audience wishing to maybe come up and speak, or? Hi.
Hi, I'm Britt Haley with the City Attorney's Office, and Craig Blewett is at the CAST conference, so he asked me to just monitor the meeting and be here if you had any questions. I think that Craig just covered everything, but if something comes up, I'm available, and I'd be happy to come up and try to address any issues.
Okay, thank you very much. Thanks for coming up. Well, I guess we're really talking about Colorado Springs here, filling this role, and curious to see how our board representatives, what direction they prefer. And I think, Joe, please.
I would be interested in serving in this capacity. Craig Blewett did ask me for this recommendation to this position, as I have been serving on the 2040 transit, specialized transit regional plan. And I've also been supporting the NCC in a lot of their efforts. I'm just very involved in our local transit scene, so I would be honored to be this representative.
That's great. Thank you. So let's have a motion real quick before there's a change of heart on that. So, please.
Well, the recommendation to use a city council person came from the city council representative, so I don't think there's any issue on that per se, but I move that we do that. Okay. That's a motion.
Motion is
Motion is to have city council representative for transit.
specifically Councilwoman Gabler, or?
Well, I think the motion is to have the city councilor be the representative, and then the city would designate who. Yeah.
There's a motion. Is there Craig?
Rob? You're looking at Craig.
Yeah.
In your board packet, part of the recommendation, we have a resolution that CDOT needs and the feds need. There are 2 blanks in there for proposed names to be filled in, and for the first representative, and then also an alternate. So this is the proof the feds and CDOT will have to say, yes, our board has passed a resolution saying that City of Colorado Springs council member number 1 and number 2 will fill this role.
So
and that deadline for this is October 1st, I think the feds
Yes,
told us.
we have to have a sitting member by October 1st.
We kind of do need to do it today.
Or have a special meeting.
Or have another meeting. So we had a motion, but I don't believe I heard a second. Councilman Knight?
I'll second it, but I just ask, once it's approved, I think the city should councilors need to go back and talk. I mean, we got a meeting, we have meetings planned before the 1st of October. If it's approved and the names, and the board is happy with that, the city provides you names after our 22nd February workshop or prior to that. If that's kosher with everybody, I'd just say do that.
Please.
I don't think it was clear that you needed 2 names today when I read the packet.
Yeah, one of my concerns is, you know, if you put that in the resolution here, but you go adopt that, you're going to have to do this every time there's an election and we have to move around. I think it's, you designate the city councilor as being the primary and alternate, and then administratively we'll provide you the names. Right?
We need to have a name.
Yes, you need to have a name.
Yes.
I'm not arguing that point. I don't think it appropriately is put in the resolution that we adopt this.
So if I can
See,
recap.
there's a difference there.
So then your motion is more specifically that we adopt this resolution with the City Council of Colorado Springs to fill in the designated representative and the alternate prior to October 1.
Correct.
That's the motion in the second?
Good.
Can I? So what I'm hearing is that you guys aren't really supportive of my taking on this role. Is that what I'm hearing today?
Absolutely not. I am absolutely supportive
I
of you
was under
taking
the
on the role.
impression that this
I'm
person needed to be on this board, a representative from this board.
correct.
So we're all here today.
It's the three of us, but I'm just arguing that administratively, I think that's a decision
It
that ought
just
to be
seems
made.
like an
within the city council.
unnecessary delay for a group that is anxious to move forward on this.
It's going to be done by October 1st. I get 2 names right there.
Well, any other members of the board have any thoughts on this? It borders on internal affairs with Colorado Springs, I realize, but I do tend to side with Councilwoman Gabler on this. If we could make the decision today, all the better, but if what I'm hearing is you think the council needs to reaffirm these appointments specifically in one of your meetings?
Well, 2 names, you only got 1 volunteer.
Right. Well, we could call a short break if you two wish to confer.
Arm wrestle?
I'd like to take a break.
You would?
Yes, I would.
Well, and we're getting there. We're actually moving pretty well today, so.
I only want 2 minutes.
Well, why don't we take a short 2-minute break, and everybody who wants to can have a piece of cake, and then we'll come back and revisit this motion. Does that work for everybody? Thank you.
That's kind of what that's what we're doing here. That isn't quite how I'd have phrased it, but that's pretty much it. I'm not sure why the name needs to be in the resolution. We will assign a council. Oh, well, I wouldn't quite.
More friendly here, but a little friendlier. We're going to lose our certification.
Well, unless we designate somebody. We're saying, yeah, designate official council. I'm saying we ought to just say the city council. Well, we need to give it a name. Absolutely true.
Well, sometimes it's really interesting, and sometimes it's just boring as hell, and it depends on the,
That's not,
but there's, it's all
we
important.
made the suggestion.
I appreciate it.
Just because I'm bored by it doesn't mean I won't participate
Yeah.
or listen or
I
whatever.
just,
but,
and Jill's perfectly fine. I don't have any problem with it.
Politics, there's vote on just not politics.
Is it loosely in my case?
Snuck in there surreptitiously. We didn't even know.
I want to make it happen, and I want to get out there and get people to support it and get it going. I really like that a lot. Politics is the personal issues and all that kind of stuff. That just
which occurs in everyday life whenever two or more people interact in your family, in the workplace, all that.
Yeah. All that always kind of. And I'm not a real emotional person. Like, you know, certain things will get me going, but for the most part, I'm pretty calm. And like, you know, I look at it as grain of salt. I'll yell like hell in the meeting and then talk to you after and smile. But as a kid, my father was the press secretary for Governor Carlo in New Mexico. My stepmom was the personal secretary for him. So I was right in the middle of politics, that kind of politics.
You grew up hearing it at the kitchen table every day.
Yeah. And he wrote a column too, so you know we were always discussing the local politics. So I'm fascinated by public perception of what we do, and then the reality of what we do, and the fact that everything gets done. You know, that the highways are out there, and that there's cops to pull people over, and that there's businesses for people to buy stuff in, and that it all works. It's just fascinating to me, you know, how it all comes together, and that you know how many people spend a great deal of their time, you know, the tax and all those kind of people that really help, and the planning commission and all that kind of stuff. I really enjoy interacting with them, and you know, hearing different ideas and different positions.
Yeah.
Be a model.
But you
Does it need to be said? Does it need to be said now? And does it need to be said now by me? So quite often I'll be going.
So you'll know he's going through that thought process.
But I'm trying to decide whether to speak up or not. And in this room, I think Keith has been here when I've really gone off,
But you were justified in doing it.
You know, I very rarely do, and I'll very rarely speak unless I have something that I have to say. And on my seniors.
On your seniors.
Yeah. That pissed me off. Thank you.
You're welcome.
You know, what I said that day was if you could see my seniors' faces in your mind right now, what I see, and how little we ask for in Park County for our seniors. Don't take away their food, because that's what it was about, you know, and it's like, no, that can't happen.
It was in one of those amounts, it wasn't that much.
Yeah, I was saying that, you know.
So I get up and leave, and then like adjourned as soon as I walked out of the room. So I came back, I'm like,
yeah,
meeting ended?
Question.
Yep.
I can just see Bloom saying,
retiree affairs.
my newspaper in Park County saying, Mark Dwelby wants to spend, wants to give another $1,000. Yeah. So you have more of a problem than I do. I mean,
Pardon me, I didn't want to get my case on you.
I need it too. Yeah. I got this great story, Rob.
I don't know.
The mayor of Alma is a kindergarten teacher, or he was a kindergarten teacher. Now he's like third grade. He's carrying this birthday cake in.
Well,
and one of the kids like runs under him, and he makes a move, and the cake starts to slide, and he catches it on the trash can, and gets the side of the trash can.
For the most part, any services to
he's
provide.
like, okay, I got it. And
provide
he looks over, and Maribel and Ross are
down below
licking
my
the
level.
trash can as fast as they can, trying to lick all that icing off the trash can.
I really don't have a large retiree. I mean, I've got 2 retirees that live on my installation now.
With the waterfall?
Yeah. So I got two retirees that live on my installation, but like I said, I don't have anybody else, and they don't run out to my installation retriever to ask for anything. So it's probably just in the span of everything else, like, okay, level of effort for level of input, and so it's probably why it gets delegated down. And that doesn't mean that. I mean, well, I've only been in the job a month and a half, so still getting a handle on all the things
stacked so hard
that I have to do. So that's probably historically why the CV doesn't come down.
Damn, Barbara Kirkmeyer.
But does nobody come out?
I don't know.
Back to the Rio Grande River or what?
I don't know. I don't know what they're going to do. I think they might drown us or
Affairs.
something. We have two commissioners that are a pain in the ass. Blah, 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 blah. Now what do you think? Think it's going to show us the toilet bowl?
Well, if they do like this with your arm, they go, give me your arm. And then they hit you with a needle and they go, now you got a chicken.
Now how do you feel?
Heck, I don't even know if I have a retiree affairs office.
And then, like I said, Colonel Huff is.
I'm Mike.
Mark, nice to meet you.
I've been busier for a second.
But I know a lot of our support services and stuff there. I didn't know if it was something
Yes.
FSS community.
When does it meet?
You put a few cents in and you get that.
Set date time?
On Thursdays.
Oh, yeah.
Weekly or monthly?
Oh, man. Our
Afternoon. What is the? And I don't remember if it's second Thursday or.
All right.
why wouldn't they want to put more money in?
Everybody's ready.
I can ask the question.
That's interesting.
I mean, I think the basic answer is what I told you.
That's
Just
my
look at it and
simple
go,
conclusion.
of the 12, of the 11 things we can do, this is number 12.
Got quiet all of a sudden there.
Sharon, was that break sufficient?
Yes, that was fine, thank you.
Okay. All right, so I know we've had a few discussions here, but we do have a motion and a second before us. That would be that we adopt the resolution and leaving it to Colorado Springs City Council to fill in the blanks for the designated representative and the alternate sometime prior to October 1, hopefully shorter rather than later time frame, so we can get that letter off and discharge this from our agenda. So, did you have something?
Yes, discussion, please?
Sure.
Well, I just wanted to clarify, did we actually formally go through that process of making the motion for those two positions, that they would both go to Colorado Springs? Because I think it's important. The CAC did bring up some arguments that I believe we should at least address on whether or not both of those positions should be allocated to Colorado Springs, and whether one should be, and maybe the other one be designated to Fountain, based on some of the concerns about adequate representation. I would like to have a brief discussion about that before we do that.
No, I think that's an excellent idea, and I apologize for not recognizing that earlier. I guess I just get kind of caught up in the fact that Mountain Metro is our designated FTA recipient, but I sometimes forget that Fountain runs their own transit down there. So, please.
In principle, I'm kind of open to the idea, but I thought that the requirement from the feds was that it be the metro area. I mean, I'm kind of inclined to accept whether it's Fountain or whether it's rotating a county commissioner or so forth. I think we have a requirement constraint, do we not?
Well, it's the representatives for the urban area, which includes Fountain up to Monument and Manitou Springs. It's sort of a bizarre-shaped, but out to Falcon also. It needs to be someone, either the designated recipient on the board of the designated recipient, or somebody who's eligible to receive the funds. So it could be City of Colorado Springs, Fountain. It could be Silver Key, a board member from Silver Key, board member from Amblicab, board member from El Paso, the El Paso County, or Fountain Valley. That's what it is, Fountain Valley Senior Center. So it could be one of them. Could be the representative.
Did you include the city of Fountain in
Yes,
this?
Fountain
Yes.
is. Yep. And Manitou Springs starts operating their own next year. If they do, it could be somebody from Manitou Springs, too.
Trying to get our shuttle together for next year. So, well, Sharon, who would you propose then from Fountain? You're the alternate, and Mayor is the
Right.
rep. So,
Well, it's my understanding from Craig it has to be somebody who's on the PPACG board?
Well, the PPACG bylaws are the elected officials should be the voting members. So if it was somebody who wasn't a elected official, that would be, so just as long as it's an elected official, I think that's the key.
Right.
According to our bylaws.
And here's a further question. Say it was Mayor Ortega who was the alternate, and he didn't come. Would his alternate from Fountain then automatically fill that role?
No, this is, the idea behind this is it's a separate position. So if, say, City of Colorado Springs council member was the designated transit rep, couldn't be here, it could be, say it was Councilmember Brown, could be the alternate. So you could theoretically have two Fountain members voting here. That would be, that would completely meet the requirements.
That would meet that requirement. Does that mess up our articles?
I don't believe so.
Okay. Well, and thank you for bringing this up here. I think we were headed towards a Colorado Springs filling both positions. I'm curious how you seem to be okay, Andy, a little bit with that idea and concept. Jill, what are your thoughts there? So,
deal.
Yeah. So then, did you want to amend your motion then?
Well, I'm go back to one of my earlier statements. I'm not sure why we need to have the particular names in the motion itself. Do we?
Well,
or in the resolution.
For purposes of the resolution, we could have changes the blanks to a city council member as a primary and a secondary as a council Fountain or some other way. But a specific person doesn't need to be named, no.
Thank you. Britt Haley from the City Attorney's Office in Colorado Springs. It may be beneficial, in fact, to not designate the actual name in the resolution, because if that were to change, then you'd have to re-provide that resolution every time it changed. So from an administrative standpoint, it really makes a lot more sense to have a resolution. I know this point was made before, but I wanted to make it formally on the record just because it is a little deviation, actually, from the common approach to actually put the representative's name in there.
Yeah, that was my earlier point. So I would amend the resolution to just say primary from Colorado Springs, alternate from Fountain. Okay. On the regular board.
Does the seconder accept that?
Yes.
Well, going back to Commissioner Glenn, do we want to always have it Fountain, or do we want to have it rotating? Because there's
that's true.
You listed several different entities that could be potential candidates.
Yes, there are half a dozen agencies that are potentially eligible to be the.
So we could say primary will be Colorado Springs City Council member, secondary will be from one of the other entities. The alternate will be from one of the other entities. Pass that as a resolution, and then today also direct to Rob that the two names put in the letter are Jill and Councilmember Brown. Thompson, sorry. I don't know why I said Brown.
Well, that gets us a template for moving future years, but gives us specific representation to accommodate the October 1 deadline.
That would be perfect from my standpoint.
Good. Commissioner, please.
And I would agree with that, but I would only argue there's probably only two other options that would either be Fountain or Manitou if we're using the criteria that it has to be an elected official. All the other entities that you mentioned were not elected officials, so it would be either Fountain or Manitou.
Maybe Manitou, as soon as we stand up our shuttle.
Right.
Might it also not be the county?
Well, yes, thank you, and the county. I tend to forget that, but I just wanted to make sure when you rattled down that list, one of the things that we were they had to be a voting member. So, I like the recommendation from Councilmember Knight.
Rob, please.
I think a suggestion for the board. We're trying to get to this first October deadline, but let me suggest during your annual meeting, you designate board officers, your public transportation rep, it's Jim Null. I think we'll now start adding in January for the year who will be the public transportation rep or agency, entity, government in this resolution, and that is good for a year.
Right.
Because as our officers and as you all know, elections, term limits happen. And so usually in January at your annual meeting, you do all those designations. I would suggest maybe do that, because you also do your stack rep and that's going to change, I think, next year. So if we get the name of the two governments in now, satisfies the Fed's October 1 deadline, and then come January, your first meeting, you could do the designation for the year. And we'll do that every year. As a suggestion.
So that seems, your motion then amended is that we approve the resolution with Colorado Springs to fill in the designated representative, the alternate to come from one of the eligible groups, eligible organizations, but to immediately be filled by the city of Fountain.
Sure.
Is that correct recap of your motion? And is that
That's a recap of my motion.
everybody happy with that? Any further comment or
Second.
questions? Seeing and hearing none, let's go ahead and vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Passes unanimously. Thank you, and thanks for volunteering, everyone.
Collaboration.
All right, well, that ends our action items. We can move on to item Section 7, information items. And I was a little remiss earlier in that I did not introduce our Colorado Transportation Commissioner, Mr. Les Gruen, who joined us shortly after we convened the meeting, but it's better late than never, so I'd like to introduce Les Gruen, our Transportation Commissioner, and hope that he will introduce the next item for us.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and it'd be my pleasure to introduce some CDOT executives that came down from our headquarters in Denver this morning to regale you. Before I make that introduction, I want to respond to the conversation about the TIP Amendment 21 and the rollover. I asked Rob to send me a letter expressing any concerns about adverse impacts that would result from that rollover, and I can follow through with that, and I'm happy to do so. I think there are a bunch of items that allow continuation, and I think if there are holdups on the part of CDOT, that's one of those things that don't result in any adverse impact. But I'll follow up on any concerns that there might be. So not everyone sitting around this table was sitting around the table several months ago when the conversation came up about predictability, when Craig said it sure would be nice from his perspective of planning if he could have more predictable information. And that, in essence, is what the presentation we're going to have today is all about. We're going to hear from Deb Perkins-Smith, Maria Sabata, and Jeff Sudemeyer. Deb and Jeff are from our Department of Transportation Development, and Maria is head of our budget office. And we're going to talk about predictability in the context of what's a very complex budgeting process. And we're going through that budgeting process now. We're budgeting for both the short term, and we're putting together a long-range plan. And I'm sorry that Councilman Miller isn't here today, because at that meeting several months ago when we talked about predictability, he did an incredibly great job explaining that distinction between the long term and the short term. And we're going to talk about a lot of that today. But I think it'll be helpful if you think of those long-term plans as aspirational and the short-term plans as more real, and the plans that we really have to deal with. We're going to hear, and you heard this term earlier from Rob, today you're going to hear from Deb and Maria about the different colors of money, where the money is coming from, the source of funds, and then the different pots of money, where it's going. And then we're going to hear about reconciling the short-term budget and the long-term budget. We had a budget workshop last week where a few of us were there, and I likened things to a generational family budget, pretending that all of us were just married and we had a child and we're thinking about a 25-year future. It makes sense to plan for the long term and figuring out how you're going to fund college and how you're going to fund a wedding fund and how you're going to fund braces and all of the other expenses that you have, and to lay that all out. And that's what we're doing in this long-range plan that Craig and Rob are working on right now. But the reality is the couple have a job and limited investments, and there's only so much coming in. So it's critical that you balance what you have coming in the short term with those long-term goals, and that's what we're going to hear about today. So with that, I'd like to introduce Deb Perkins-Smith, who heads up our Department of Transportation Development.
Thank you, Les.
Welcome.
So thank you for having me here, Chairman, and also board members, and congratulations on getting your Tiger Grant. That's actually a great accomplishment. Only a few, it's not like we get one each round, so that was excellent news. As Commissioner Gruen mentioned, I'm going to talk about more the long-term planning, about 25 years, and we call this program distribution. And it's important to you all because you take that information to then figure out what you're doing here at the MPO in terms of your planning. And I wanted to also, Jeff, could you just raise your hand? Jeff has been working with all the MPOs in terms of the details of this and with all your staff. So this is part of the statewide transportation plan development process, and that plan goes out to 2040. So again, I'm talking about looking in the future, sending the kid to college, how are we going to get there? And as part of this program distribution process, we have two things. One, we have to do a forecast. How much money do we actually think is coming in over the next 20 years? And then how are we going to spend that money, or what programs are we going to allocate that money to? In the past, it was called resource allocation, if you've been on the board for a while. And it's a cooperative process. We have a state transportation advisory committee with representatives from all over the state and the different MPOs. And they're all part of this process, as well as we work individually with the MPOs as well. And it also gets the blessing of the Transportation Commission by resolution. This is a different process than the annual budget process, as Commissioner Gruen mentioned. I mean, maybe the way to think about that is the annual budget process is like what your income is for the year. And Maria's going to talk about that, the more near-term, based on a short-term process like 4 years, as well as your yearly annual budget process. So what do our revenues look like over the next 20 years? So we had some very in-depth workshops to come up with what we thought our budget would look like. As you can see, it's mostly flat, about a little bit under 1.4 billion a year. So we're projecting it's fairly flat. The reason you see that bump at the beginning, there's something called the Senate Bill 228, and for 5 years we could have money flowing to CDOT for just those 5 years, and so that's why you've got that big bump at the beginning, and then it drops down. And we're estimating right now that may be around 200 million a year. And again, that's a number that we will get each year specifically after the revenues have come in. The state legislature will let us know whether or not we've gotten additional funds. So that's what it looks like. If you actually look at your purchasing power, this is what we're dealing with over the next 20 years. And this is based on a 3% deflation rate. So just to let you know, staying flat is not necessarily a good thing. You think about it, materials go up, labor goes up. We're actually seeing a big spike right now, and I think some of you may be aware of that in terms of our construction costs. They've been flat because the industry's been hungry during our past few years, and now we're seeing a huge spike right now, which is a good thing because there's growth in the economy, but it means projects are more expensive for us. So then that's what our revenues are like. So then we say, okay, if that's how much money we're getting over the next 20 years, what programs are we going to put that money to? And there are a couple of things that guide us in that. One is MAP 21, and that is our federal authorization bill. It has some new requirements in it that I'll talk about in a minute. Also, in some cases, directs specifically what the money can go to, and we have to adhere to that or you don't get the money. We also have a requirement under MAP 21 called the Risk-Based Asset Management Plan. That's new for us. And then also Transportation Commission ultimately decides by resolution and adopts where the overall program distribution in all these programs. And they also have something called Policy Directive 14, where they set goals for the state in terms of what level they want surface treatment to be at, bridge, that sort of thing. And then we obviously take input from the STAC and all our planning partners. So let me talk about MAP 21 for a minute because this is new. It requires performance-based approach to planning and programming. They're actually requiring us to set performance measures for our surface treatment, for our pavement, and for our bridges. And so we have been working on that, and as part of that, the Commission we tied that to PD 14. The Commission has agreed that statewide, we call it drivability life of our payment, we have to meet that 80% threshold. If we don't, they'll take funds from other programs and start pushing it into that area. They want to try and meet those goals. There's also a requirement under MAP 21. We have to take a look at our shorter-term plan that Maria's going to talk about and make sure that we are hitting those goals that are in the long-range plan that I was just talking about. We're also required to do a risk-based asset management plan, and an asset management plan is our pavement, it's our bridges, it's our walls, it's all the things that you think about in terms of the capital improvements in the transportation system. And we're required by the feds to do this plan. If we do not do it, we would see a reduction of 35% in our federal funds. We are not leaving money on the table, so we got ahead of the game and had the second process approved of all the states in the United States. We wanted to make sure we are not leaving anything on the table in terms of funds. We've set up a framework, and it'll change over time. We just wanted to make sure that we got that plan in place. So the Commission, they've really focused, even though this is a long-range plan out to 2040, they really focused on the first 10 years because then we have an update cycle and we'll come back in about 4 years. So we really wanted to focus on those first 10 years. And the Commission direction was taking a look at the programs and what we have, what goals we've set. Their interest was in funding the infrastructure condition first and maintenance, meaning your maintenance for snow and ice, your daily maintenance. That's really critical to them, as well as then also maintaining assets like replacing bridges. That was more important to them than looking at expansion. Expansion, adding capacity is important, but let's maintain what we have first, because without that, it's even worse. And that was then voiced within Policy Directive 14. And in addition to the infrastructure, we also have the goals on safety. We have some very specific programs from the feds, which we received money for, that have to be directed to safety, and so we set safety goals as well as some other goals. And obviously this aligns with the asset management plan that I was talking about. So when we took a look at allocating the funds down to we have about 30 programs, allocating the programs down to those funds, over the first 10 years, we do pretty well in terms of our assets. But after the first 10 years through at 2025, that actually starts to go down. We have trouble financing and providing enough funds to maintain our assets. And that's without even taking into consideration that deflation. So it also required that over the next 10 years, we hold our other programs, like capacity-type programs, kind of steady at where they are now, as opposed to having a big increase, because our funds are really limited. After 2025, we really feel, well, as you saw, there would be insufficient funds to maintain things at the condition or the levels that we're at today. And the loss of the purchasing power will actually affect that even more greatly. So what happens after that? So the Commission, by resolution, has adopted how much statewide goes into each of these programs. Remember, that was included based on input from the MPOs and the State Transportation Advisory Committee. Then the federal law requires us to work with the MPOs so that you can develop your plans as well. And we help with planning estimates for that as to how much money that you think you'll get in terms of transportation from the state and the feds. And that's a starting point for you. You can make additional assumptions on top of that. And so the planning estimates that you receive are based on, sometimes it's a very specific formula from the feds that's based on population, and we don't have any choice in the matter. Some of the programs is based on adopted formulas at the commission, but that was based on input from the MPOs and the stack. And then for others that there aren't specific formulas, so for example, on surface treatment, we actually have a program where the money goes out to the places that need it the most, so the worst ranked places get the money. So we take a look at historic allocation data for that, or some other type of formula, because there's not a specific formula as to how that money is going out. But that gives you a budget that you can work with, at least a starting point in terms of what you're going to receive from, or could receive from fed or state funds for transportation. So the next steps are, on Friday, you'll get planning estimates for the MPO at a meeting on Friday. The staff will be attending. We'll work through that with you all, taking a look at it, and we'll discuss it, see if any changes need to be made. We have been meeting monthly for quite a while in terms of this, so it's not a surprise. We've been working with staff already. And then we'll continue to coordinate with you through the development of the 2040 plan, and obviously in identifying projects for the plan and the Transportation Improvement Program, which Maria is going to talk about a little bit, which is a shorter-term implementation plan. So with that, any questions? Remember, this is the long-range planning level.
So traditionally, the local MPOs would put in for work to be done on state highways. But it's my understanding, no, that's no longer going to be the case, that instead CDOT's going to say, we're going to take care of state highways, and we'll decide which state highways need the most attention, who gets the work. Is that correct?
So let me explain something that's changed. Under MAP 21, we are told we have to do performance measures now. In the past, the money went out to the regions, and the regions said, okay, we think this road, this road, this road. Now, we actually have a model that they've always used statewide to take a look at what are the worst areas, or what are the best areas. So now under MAP 21, we have performance measures. So we have to look statewide and make sure that we meet those performance measures. If we don't, the feds could tell us, we're not sure yet, the rulemaking's not finished, they could tell us where to direct the funds. So we don't want to be in that situation. We're taking a look at statewide where those funds need to be directed, and as part of that model, it tells us, okay, these are the roads that need this certain type of treatment and are the highest priority. We then work with the regions that say, okay, here's our list of, what's not good, where we need to put money. And there's still a conversation back and forth at the region with the locals, what do you think of this list? And then from that list, they pick the worst ones in that list, and that's what comes back to CDOT. So does that help? So it's a little bit different than in the past, but the idea is to get to the worst things in the region. If that makes sense. Les?
In terms of surface treatment, we're taking a different approach to how we look at surface treatment, and not to spend a lot of time getting into the details. The results of that different approach is that we're able to treat more road every single year with the same amount of dollars. So we're trying, all of this is about, everything you're hearing about from Deb and that you'll be hearing about from Maria is to use our limited dollars more efficiently. If you think back to our graph, whether we're looking at constant dollars or deflated dollars, we can't anticipate, or the Commission has directed staff not to anticipate any more revenue over the long term. So we're just trying to figure out how to do our job in a more efficient, smarter way.
Thank you, and that leads to my second question, which you say you're not planning for any additional revenues. And yet, we had the mayor of Lone Tree and Mr. Hunt down here 6-8 months ago, or whatever, however long it was, talking about some ideas. I understand those are dead in the water now, but is there any discussion at headquarters about how to move forward with perhaps some additional revenue streams?
I think there are various constituencies around the state, not necessarily within CDOT, that are very interested in that. The same constituencies that were interested the last time you heard from Don Hahn and the mayor of Lone Tree. The Transportation Commission, the 11 of us that are appointed by the governor to think about this long term, do not see at this present time any new revenue sources from everything in our experience. So we're just trying to be prudent in planning ahead and developing these plans. And one thing we could have done in a decision we made, for example, and all of you think about in your own budgets, is how do you treat future revenues? Do you inflate future revenues? Because if you inflate future revenues at a higher rate than inflation, then you're going to show an increase over time. That's another decision that the commission made, is we're not going to assume, we're not going to bail ourselves out by assuming a higher rate of revenues than inflation. So what am I saying at the end of the day? The commission is being conservative when they're forecasting revenues ahead, and if there are new revenue sources, this current commission, and I can assure you future commissions, are very capable of reallocating those funds to the benefit of the state.
If I could just add to what Commissioner Gruen was saying, I'm not sure if everyone's aware, but there's a state and federal gas tax, and the state gas tax, it hasn't been increased since the early 90s. So it's been the same for the last 20 years, and it's not based on how much, on the dollar amount you spend at the gas pump. It's a flat rate, so it depends on how much you purchase. And what happens as vehicles become more fuel efficient, which is a good thing, as they become more fuel efficient, we're receiving less money because they're not buying as much gasoline. And that's why it looks very flat, even if you have more people driving. And so there have been some discussions around the state, what can we do to help in terms of combating, the deflation, and the situation will be in the future. And as you alluded to, there had been an initiative to take a look at what was the appetite for some sort of gas tax increase or sales tax increase. From some polling, a sales tax increase looked more favorable, but then with further polling, it wasn't enough. People just didn't have the appetite right now for a tax increase. So we're trying to do the best we can with what we have, and the commission, obviously said based on that, we have to assume that it's flat.
Thank you. Rob?
Yeah, bringing it full circle, and Deb, thank you for coming down and giving the segue into what this board does is when you are doing your long-range plan development now through the committees and through the local governments. So as Deb said, this is an input into that. When we come back to you in the next month or two in the long-range plan fiscal component, we're going to broaden the discussion to say, what are the assumptions on the local governments? You all build roads and do some things, maybe with transit and other things. You have this creature called the Pikes Peak RTA. That's a sales tax, and we've asked the board already, what's your estimate through 2040? And the RTA board said, we're going to assume that gets continued for that whole time frame. We redo this every 4 years, so it doesn't hold you for a long time, but at least for 3 years. But we look at those assumptions to say, okay, the PPRTA is going to build stuff, do maintenance, pay for transit. We'll put that in the long-range plan to say that's our estimate. And then also look at the deflation piece of it to say for, like Colorado Springs, you have a transit system. It costs you X dollars a year to fund it. Over the long term, that's going to erode 3% a year. So what do you do when you cross the line of money available and service delivery? So we're going to ask that question of the local governments. We'll have the CDOT number, we'll have the federal highway number, federal transit number. Aviation, we put the airport plan in our plan. So we broaden this discussion that right now this is the CDOT version of input, and we'll ask even about the CDOT categories. As Commissioner Gruen said, where the commission is, we'll bring that. Here's where the thinking is from the commission, the STAC, and staff, and others to say, what are these big numbers? And Debbie talked about Senate Bill 228. we're going to ask the board, what's the assumption on that? Does it sound like 200 million is good statewide? And if so, what projects in here on our list of 250 projects, including the state highway projects, can we fund with that? If that's even a reasonable source for the board to say, we think we'll get some of that money or none of that money. But we'll go through those 30 categories, but all the other categories as well. When you're all done with that, you'll have the fiscal plan, and then the fun part, you'll match the dollars in the fiscal plan to that list of 250 projects that you're going to fund. You're not going to fund 250 projects. You're going to fund 50 projects. And on the state highway, you may fund only 10 state highway projects. So that's how it ties together, but this is the start. And 1.2 billion statewide sounds great, except it used to be 1.7 billion-ish. And so when you say flat revenues, we're going to look at that too, because PPRTA is assuming actually increasing over time with the sales tax. And so we're going to bring all this together for you in the next 2 months. So it's a forewarning of major assumptions over 26 years. And don't worry, we won't hold you to them, because we won't hold ourselves to them. The projects are going to be whatever they are, but that's the forewarning of start thinking about big fiscal assumptions. Remember, it's federal, state, and local. You're all going to get your crystal ball, and actually Craig has one. We may bring it down. But you're going to give us a sense of what's reasonable for all these funding sources, and then it usually works out, and Craig can help me, when we get back to our 6-year or 10-year tip, it's about $100 million a year for transportation, everything. And so what do you do with $100 million a year eventually be your question. But we start with 26 years, and we get back to 6 years, 10 years, 4 years, and next year. So I just wanted to provide that quick background, because sounds okay with $1.2 billion, but that doesn't buy what it used to.
Doesn't go as far as it used to. So with that, Maria, you want to come up and talk about the STIP?
Okay. Thanks. I was trying to get this out.
The top.
It's hard. The rest is all info anyway. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair, board members. I'm Maria Sabata. I'm the budget director. I actually joined CDOT a year ago yesterday, 2 days before the floods. So I can empathize with the chair when he mentioned the multiple funding sources that you have to familiarize yourself with in a reasonably short amount of time. I would also like to thank the TAC, and my fellow CDOT staff members for helping prepare for today's presentation to the board. I've appreciated all of the input that we've received as we've met with all of your committees, and I certainly have been challenged with all of the acronyms as well. But I really welcome the opportunity to learn more about what happens outside of CDOT as it relates to transportation over the past year. And so I'd like to take just a step back very quickly and talk to you a little bit about what brought us to the point we're at today with the TIP-STIP reconciliation. So when I interviewed for my position, I happened to ask the question, why does CDOT have $1.5 billion in the bank? When I received the job, I found out that my first order of business was to lower that cash balance over the next several years. And what led us to this point is that in 1996, as you can see from this chart, we had a cash balance approximately $69 million, and that became an audit finding. Again, in 2000, we had another audit finding when our cash balance was $300 million. Over the next several years, CDOT practiced a very conservative approach to the way that they budgeted and funded projects. And while it was a very logical approach, it certainly led us to the point we're at today, where we have an inefficient use of cash. And so that is my charter and my team's charter. I wanted to point out that RAMP was announced, and RAMP is the Responsible Acceleration of Maintenance and Partnerships, in November of 2012 by the governor as a result of the significant cash balance that CDOT had. And we have worked over the past several months to implement cash management procedures, and it is a huge change management effort on behalf of the entire CDOT staff. And when I introduced the annual budget last year to the Statewide Transportation Advisory Committee, or STAC, I received a lot of questions about what CDOT was doing with program management and cash management. And that truly is why I'm here today, because as a result of those discussions, we realized that we hadn't reconciled the annual revenues that we receive to the tips in the regions. And so we set the course to do that. But one of the things that went hand in hand with that is our work with the Transportation Committee and with the Executive Director to establish targets as to where we wanted to be over the next several years regarding the cash balance. And that leads me to a discussion about this chart. I wanted to point this out because we are currently in the process, as we're developing all of the new procedures, to actually measure our cash balance. So as we're building the bridge, so to speak, and moving towards new processes, we're measuring ourselves on our performance. So we are very actively trying to implement cash management as we are developing the processes. So it's been a real challenge, but I think over the past several months, based on the questions we've received from the regions, from the STAC, we've really come together with the region and our regional staffs to figure this out collectively. It's not just a CDOT-led event anymore or process. So every month I present this to the Transportation Commission and the Executive Director, and it measures our progress as to how we're measuring versus our target to achieve a $300 million, I'll say, contingency balance in cash, an additional $200 million in federal equivalents, which is our obligation from the from FHWA, Federal Highways. And as you can see, we're struggling a little bit in the first months of implementation versus our target that we established in April. A lot of the conversations regarding the issues with increasing construction costs is certainly playing into that. We certainly have a lot of additional contracts in the works with RAMP, and so that could also be causing it. But again, CDOT staff is actively working on multiple solutions to drive this cash balance down. So I wanted to point out kind of how we're moving forward with cash. I will also tell you, you'll hear the term program management as well. Our cash management initiative works very closely with the program management team because I need to be able to count on very specific drawdown schedules in order to be able to establish how we're going to monitor cash and make sure that we don't get into the danger zone. So there's multiple initiatives occurring at CDOT, program management and cash management, and they're very much interwoven. So it really is the work of many people. So part of the reason I'm here today is just to make sure that people are aware and provide some transparency. And I will say as we move forward, I've mentioned some of these, but as we move forward in implementation, it involves many different processes being considered, so it will be a process that takes over a year to actually work through. And here are the major things that we'll be working on. Separating the STIP from the budget. I know last week when we met in a board workshop to talk about this, I got a lot of smiles when I talked about that. We will implement a cash-based STIP. We will be looking at doing quarterly-based revenue forecasts, and so there are a lot of challenges in putting more work into my team to make sure that we're doing quarterly forecasts now and syncing up with the Office of State Budget and Planning from the state level. We talked a little bit about creating four-year budgets for projects I know earlier, and I will work very closely, as we have with the STIP, with the regions to make sure that we're aligned with that. So Craig has been incredibly helpful as a participant on the team under Jeff Sudemeyer to look at the STIP and the TIP, and so we'll continue to engage the regions on those task forces to make sure that we're aligned. We also have to develop an incremental encumbrance process, which means a lot of work on the contracting side with our contractors, and we're working through a lot of those efforts with the State Controller's Office and the AG's office. And we also just adopted a new Policy Directive 703, which outlines the projects that need to be approved by the Transportation Commission to move forward. We actually have, through the implementation of this PD, we expect that the projects that we need to take forth to the Commission for approval on a monthly basis will be decreased by 2/3. The advantage to, I think, all of you and to CDOT staff is that projects can go to add much more quickly than they did in the past, and so we'll be ahead of the game and get more construction on the road. We also, obviously, as a result, have to monitor lettings to make sure that the cash balance never gets into the danger zone that I had mentioned, because we don't ever want to be in a position where we have to take short-term borrowings to make sure we get projects done. So that is a key component of this entire process change at CDOT. Okay. So the real reason that I'm here today is really to talk about recent discussions that revealed major differences between the TIP and the STIP, several pools. And as I had mentioned, when I presented last year's annual budget, so fiscal year 15's annual budget, to STAC, I received a lot of questions about what we were doing with cash management and program management, and that's why I wanted to point that out. We decided that we would have workshops with the MPOs and TPRs in April and May, and that we would come back with kind of how we were going to move forward to reconcile differences that were discovered during those conversations over the next several months, and that's why I'm here today. So I want to step back. Pools reflect the funds remaining for a funding source, so we've talked a lot about the different funding sources we have, after accounting for projects that have been programmed. And the differences that resulted between the TIP, so the PPACG TIP and the STIP, were that the programs and the pools, the pools were not updated to reflect all of the program projects, and they also were not updated in recent years to reflect the annual budget cycle. And I think we've talked a lot about the fact that, you know, you have the long-term plan, but every year, and I'm in that process right now, just like all of you are, in developing CDOT's 16 budget, we didn't communicate with the regions as to what those changes were in the annual budget versus what was in program distribution. And so that led us to the difference in our numbers in program projects. So as a result, our pool balances for fiscal year 15 needed to be amended into the TIP to reconcile. We talked a little bit about the TIP and the STIP. So the TIP, or the Transportation Improvement Program, they're developed by the MPO and incorporated into the statewide improvement program. And typically these are developed every 4 years. The most recent STIP covers 2012 to 2017 and was adopted in May 2011. What I found most challenging when I joined was that we also had the implementation of MAP 21 right in the middle of the STIP. So that certainly caused a lot of reconciling issues because we were moving to a different federal policy, and we already had committed to projects that were in the STIP. So we had to do a lot of reconciliation of the STIP because of MAP 21. So the most recent Pikes Peak COG TIP covers 2013 through 18, and it was adopted in 2012, and it was approved by the governor and FHWA in February 2013. The TIPs and the STIPs are developed based on forecasting funding levels, as Deb was talking about, as identified in program distribution. It's always good to repeat because I found that I had to hear things 7 or 8 times before I truly understood it. And again, that was formerly known as resource allocation. And then the program distribution is developed as part of the STIP every 4 years. I don't think I need to repeat the last one. All right, so moving on to the annual budget cycle. I know this is somewhat repetitive. But again, we are in the process of looking at updated revenue projections using our revenue model. And I received a lot of great questions, particularly from the CAC, on the revenue projection model itself. And adjustments are made to reflect actual receipts from previous years. So today, actually, if you saw me looking at my iPhone a lot during previous presentations, it's because we're putting together our Transportation Commission packet, and it's due at noon today. And I will be reporting out to the Transportation Commission how much surplus or deficit there is based on a reconciliation of 2014 revenues. I'm happy to report there's a slight surplus of funds that the TC will be able to direct, but the model's fairly close. It's pretty close every year. So we do know measures and degrees of freedoms. We got a lot of questions about that. So at some point, maybe I can come back and we can talk a little bit more about it. So the TIPs and the STIPs are typically amended to reflect those changes identified through the annual budgeting process. And periodically, it is necessary to reconcile the TIP and the STIP. Some of the pools that will be amended to reflect the correct remaining balances are RPP and faster safety. I do want to mention that RPP will be a regionally controlled funding source going forward, and funds will be transferred. So I'm not certain if a lot of you are familiar, but as part of the cash management process, in order to be able to fund projects expeditiously, we're going to have to be moving funds in and out of programs as we see fit. That takes a lot of trust between the region, and we're working through those processes. But there was a request for RPP that maintain those funds remain within the regional control, and they will. And those funds will be rolled forward. So the funds will never be, like let's say we have a surplus in a particular project, and it's related to RPP. Those funds will not be transferred into another budget category. They will remain within the regional control. Okay. There is still reconciliation that needs to be done regarding RPP. There are still discussions occurring between Region 2 and the MPOs and TPRs. The other pool that does need to be amended is faster safety. And so this pool will be reduced per an agreement between Pikes Peak COG and CDOT. The pool will be reduced to zero because the funding is already accounted for in program projects such as I-25 North and Cimarron. Okay. Some pool balances are for programs that are not allocated at either the region or MPO level. In these instances, funds are not assigned to the region or MPO, but to the project once it's ready to move forward. An example, or the best examples of that, are Bridge and Faster Bridge. For these programs, there's not a predetermined allocation. The bridge condition and performance-based models determine how funds are allocated. And so as it relates to the TIP-STIP reconciliation that I was talking about, as a result of that, Pikes Peak and CDOT have agreed that these pools should be removed from the fiscal year 15 STIP, including the bridge program, $2.7 million, congestion relief, and in this case, I want to clarify that because this question came up. Congestion relief in this case is the Courtesy Patrol in Metro Denver. It does not impact CMAQ. I want to be clear. And there are no funds required for Region 2 in that area. Faster Bridge, that's a statewide program I mentioned up above. It'll be based on performance-based model. Hazard elimination of $2.2 million, and this program was eliminated by MAP 21. Maintenance and operations, $32.8 million. Again, because of MAP 21 and PD 14, this is not allocated regionally. And strategic projects, $17.9 million, and this program was unfunded by legislature. So when we talk about the TIP amendment that's occurring, these are the items that we will be addressing. Okay. In the future, to make sure that we do not have an issue with this reconciliation, CDOT is committed to providing notices to all MPOs of updated annual budget amounts for programs. We will reconcile with Pikes Peak the TIP and STIP more frequently. I think that quarterly, I think, would be a reasonable amount of time, and we will provide periodic updates on program projects and the amounts of fund program by category. Again, I think as a result of what was a difficult conversation early on, we've come to a point to learn how to work better together, so I don't expect that we're going to have the issues that we've had in the past. So I'm really hopeful about that. And then we will work to make sure the TIP is updated regularly to reflect changes in the funds available by program through TIP amendments. Okay. So what's happening now? CDOT and Pikes Peak are finalizing the TIP-STIP reconciliation this month, and we will submit that amendment to Pikes Peak during September. There will be action taken by the TAC and the CAC again in September, with the expectation that it be brought back to all of you in October for approval. At this point, I'd be happy to answer any questions or field comments.
It's a lot to digest.
I know, and it's an interesting topic. I've had a lot of fun learning about it, and I would really welcome the opportunity to come back as we are working through the cash management processes, so that we can really kind of help take away the mystery of cash management.
Maria would really like to be a dinner guest at each of your homes. Chat over dinner.
Yeah, it's fun.
You can see how complex this is. That's why I tried to lead in and give you a broad overview. There's the long term, there's the short term, and there's trying to figure out a reconciliation between the difference and just dealing with your short-term budget and the amount of money that you really have coming in with your long-term goals, and then keeping one in sync with the other.
Mm-hmm. So we've really got three pools of money now. We've got the traditional STIP, we've got the cash management STIP, and we've got the 228 money. And the latter two are going to be handled pretty much from a top-down process as opposed to a bottom-up process. Is that a fair statement?
I guess I'll defer on the 228, kind of the process, because we didn't get into a lot of detail about how that's going to go.
Yeah, so on 228, that's a process we're just starting to work on with the commission. The commission actually has to set the guidelines in terms of how we deal with 228, and so we're just starting that process now with the commission. But what you can do, and we've asked all the regions this, what projects are important to you so we can be ready. You can start having that conversation now, so we can be ready once we know, how much money we think it is. The different regions will put forward, we think these are the best projects, and here's why. We've given some criteria to the regions as to how projects would compete well. Part of the issue is we don't know from one year to the next if we will get the money. So it has to be a type of project where you could actually turn it off and it doesn't affect something if the money doesn't come through. It also, by legislation, has to be strategic. So you will be having those conversations, and we're just starting that process now. And I'm not sure I understood, heard the other two? Okay.
So I want to be clear, and I didn't mention this earlier. So there isn't a new source of revenue, per se, for cash management. It's really, truly how we're managing the projects within a cash-based STIP, if that makes sense. So we need to make sure that projects that are ready to go are funded. And what we're not doing any longer is we're not trying to save for the entire project to be budgeted or funded before we move forward. And that's why program management, and I'd mentioned the drawdown schedules are so important, and they have to be accurate, because my department is going to be moving funds in and out of projects that are ready to go, so that any project that was approved in the STIP is going to get funded at some point when it's ready to go. It's not sitting out there waiting. If it gets stuck in environmental, we're not saving that money in the bank. We're aware of what's holding it up and when the funds will be needed by better communication and through trust, and we're going to pull it in when it's ready to go. So cash management is more cash manager, or I should say the cash expenditure STIP is more of the management tool by which we will use the funding sources that we currently have today.
Okay. Thank you.
Does that help?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, continuing on that for the board policy and your decision, I'll boil it down to you approve a TIP, the TIP goes in the STIP. Verbatim by reference. Any project you approve and all your funding sources are in there. Good news, policy-wise, and Craig and I think CDOT's talked about this, your TIP was developed under cash management principles. So only if you have a 4-year expenditure of a project, in your TIP it shows the 4-year expenditure, not all the money in year 1. So we've been doing that. So luckily, I think your projects in the TIP, whether they're funded from any source, federal, state, local, private, donations, any of that, we just recommend look at the TIP that has all the details of the project, both horizontally and vertically, meaning over how long it's going to take to fund it, and then what are those funding sources. So you can see the small print of your TIP Amendment 21 today. We track it in excruciating detail to show the funding sources, and so if anything changes, so we applaud CDOT with helping us track the funding sources changes, because that's the hardest thing to nail down. But remember, they're doing their funding sources, but your local governments have your own funding sources. And then we throw in PPRTA, Mountain Metro Transit, any developer projects that are built by any and all of you. No one source builds all these projects. So in the TIP, you have the excruciating detail, and so we'll continue to provide that. And so as things change in any of those funding sources, hopefully on the upward swing, we like 228. We hope it continues for 5 years. Thank you, legislature. That's leaning them to not move the money anywhere. So if that goes to CDOT, then as you heard, if there's a project or funds in this region, it'll show up in your TIP as a TIP amendment as well. So we look forward to keeping those funding sources straight, the projects on track, and any glitches in funding or cost increases, you will see a TIP amendment. As you can see, we've got 21 TIP amendments so far. We'll probably do one a month for here on out. But that's just to keep things straight. But if CDOT reduces TIP amendments, we're okay with that as well, as long as the projects continue to get done. And as you see, we rolled over 12 projects today. That's okay to roll the money over. We just want to make sure the project money doesn't get forgotten about or disappear. So the TIP's going to be the document that we'll suggest you all look at. And the TIP amendment that you just heard Maria talk about, that's coming through the committees to do that reconciliation of pools, projects, and everything else that the big change 2 years ago, and I think, Maria, you said it right on, Federal Highways, CDOT approved our TIP 2 years ago, including all those line item funding sources, pools and all. The way that's been allocated has changed in the 2 years. So that's the big reason we have to do a reconciliation. So look for that next month, and I didn't do the math, but it's a lot of money. And so you'll see how that affects the different line items.
Hold on, Mr. Baker.
Yes, Bob Baker, the CAC. One of the interesting questions that we discussed at the CAC was the risk that the state might be taking. I'll call it market risk, given that they are using cash to fund certain projects dependent on the repayment from the Federal Highway Trust Fund. And there was an element of discussion about that trust fund and the strength of that trust fund. And I'd like Maria to just kind of talk about that element as we talk about risk-based cash management.
So probably as all of you are aware, this year we were faced with a possible insolvency. And I pointed out the cash balance target slide that uses information that we're gathering as part of program management, the drawdown schedule, and available cash, and has some assumptions. When we found out and when we were in communication with FHWA regarding at what point we could expect certain levels of reimbursement, we actually amended that chart for 4 or 5 different scenarios so that we knew when we would have to start pulling back on projects. We were not at a point ever to have to go to Executive Director Hunt and suggest that happen before I think there was a resolution to extend it through May. So we are still considering what will happen as of May, but it's not as urgent as it was earlier in the summer. However, to the points that were brought up earlier regarding alternative sources of revenue for the state, I heard that loudly and clearly when we met with the TAC, and it's something that I do want to bring up with Scott Richmond, our CFO, that we start really talking to those groups that are working on those alternative sources, because just as we felt that issue earlier in the summer with the insolvency pending and looming, I think we need to be prepared for the long-term impacts of that fund continuing to decrease, and really what its value is to the state, too, on a deflated basis, right? We saw those numbers as well. So interestingly, I was at WashTO this year, and I really enjoyed it because you get to hear from other states what they're looking into. And one of the sessions I sat into had to do exactly with that, with alternative revenue sources. So look forward to future conversations about that. Not certain if that answers your question, per se, but we are monitoring HUTF insolvency.
I think you said you were keeping a forward funding limit on time.
3 months. Okay. So back to the slide. I can show you this. So the dark blue shaded area represents our cash balance. So all of our funds, excluding local funds, I should say. And we have a target balance of approximately $300 million, which is approximately 3 months of our construction cycle. So that is our goal. that at any point, so when I said that we're going to monitor cash lettings, we are going to be monitoring where our lettings take us relative to that $300 million with what we're expecting to continually receive in federal reimbursements on our projects. Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think we have one more presenter from CDOT, or no? No, we're all done. Oh. Well, thank you all for coming down, and it's going to be a process, I think, for us to really get our arms around all of these changes. We have a local elected official of some influence who likes to beat up on this board, and specifically his entities, members of this board. I like to tell people that we've let $188 million slide through our fingers in this region. We haven't been fighting for our regional share of the CDOT transportation dollars. And we would certainly appreciate any help we can get from CDOT in countering that argument. And I know staff here does a great job. We've got a lot of projects that are truly shovel-ready, ready to go, got all their clearances and everything else. And so we'll be looking forward to working with you guys to get those projects funded and out the door, and see if we can eliminate that mischaracterization that seems to come up rather all too frequently.
Well, Mr. Chair, thank you for that comment. Even though this presentation was overwhelming,
yes,
what you sought lay therein. I mean, this explained the reconciliation between these two plans, or the lack thereof, explained that $188 million. So I'll just leave it at that. But I want to thank the Denver headquarters staff from coming down and hopefully addressing some of the questions you have. They're always available. Rob and Craig do a great job of interfacing. And I think over the last 2 or 3 years, what I've seen is improved interaction between both CDOT staff and PPACG staff. So with that interaction and communication, we're all going to benefit from that.
And I think here on the board, I was talking to Commissioner Heisey, our chair, that we're going to start trying to make some pilgrimages to Denver a little bit more with some of our elected officials and come up and see if we can't continue this education process for us and hopefully for you all also. So, any questions or thoughts?
I like stroganoff, if anybody wants to.
Good to know. Thank you, Maria. Okay. So we can jump on then to item 7B, Regional Transportation Plan Update, only chapters 1, 4, and 15.
Yes,
Taking
thanks.
this off in bite-sized pieces, are we?
That's exactly it. One of the things that I've heard pretty clearly from the board is when we dump an 800-page plan on you for a 30-day review or a week ahead of time for release for public comment, that sometimes you don't have time to read that 700 or 800 pages before you're releasing it. So the approach we're taking this time is to give you chapters ahead of time. The TAC and CAC have seen these chapters or the content of these chapters over over the last year. It's very similar to previous plans. These are more plan updates than it's not a new creation. We're taking into account some of the new assumptions with the funding, and we don't do one big approval. There's more incremental approvals that go through. You'll see some of the previous board approvals outlined in the memo. Starting in November 2012 was the first approval, which was vision, mission, and principles. The most recent approval that we've gotten on our plan was from May of 2014, just 4 months ago. Expect to see some more things come forward for approval. In the next couple of months, you'll see the funding that was just talked about combined with the local funding levels. The congestion management process, the non-motorized plan, the transit and specialized transit plans will be coming forward, all aiming for a January 2015 release of the whole plan for public comment, and then March of 2015 approval of that plan. Next month, we hope to bring a couple more chapters for you to review. Chapter 2, the regional setting, which is actually the biggest chapter. It's a really good history of what's gone on in the region, and if you're feeling sleepy, it will assist you in that. We also hope to bring project scores and, like I said, the initial funding levels, not for approval on the funding levels. The scores we'd like to get approval because when we're taking a little different tack this time. You get scores, and scores are supposed to inform selection. They're not the default selector of projects. And there's many different ways, many philosophies that you can use to use those scores to develop fiscally constrained portfolios. So we'd like to get the scores, a formal approval of the scores, and then we'll go back to the CAC and TAC with multiple philosophies, different ways to use those. Maintenance first, or let's take care of our congestion problems, or different ways to take those and inform, come up with multiple portfolios for discussion, both at the advisory committee and here at the board. With that, if you have any comments on those 3 chapters, please get them back to us. We like getting things knocked off. I have a board with checklist of chapters as they're done, and none of them are checked off. So I'd like to be able to start checking some of those chapters off.
I'm glad you started with relative softball chapters here, so
yes,
get us into the process. Any questions, thoughts? I think everybody's a little overwhelmed.
Yes.
See that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Craig. Okay, moving on to the Statewide Transportation Advisory Committee agenda, and I guess, okay, that's right, you are one of our alternates up there, so thank you, Norm.
Most you know, Wayne Williams is our primary. He is not here today, so I'm going to step in and do the best I can. You may know that Wayne has served as the vice chair of the Statewide Transportation Advisory for probably 10 years.
He's been vice chair for 6 years.
6 years, okay, but has served on the stack for probably at least 10. Last month, he stepped down from the vice chair position. He is still our representative to the stack, but in view of his hopefully impending election to statewide office, he has stepped down as vice chair. I'm hoping that our CDOT folks will be here. I just want to express my appreciation to Deb and Maria and Jeff for coming down to talk. A couple of things in the agenda. You have it before you. The SB 09228, it's a big issue. A couple of things that is triggered by whether or not there's a 5% personal income increase. We expect that to happen, but that's not. There's still a couple factors that can influence that. One is, of course, TABOR. There's a complicated TABOR formula that might influence how much that is actually distributed. And then, of course, we have a legislature who still has an impact on how those monies are sent. I don't think it's mandatorily directive whether that 228 money comes specifically to transportation. It could go to other places as well.
Well, the 228 has to 90% to transportation projects and 10% for strategic transit projects.
Under the current
system, yes.
Okay.
So the way it's set up. And not to interrupt, but one of the things that Rob and I have been talking about with CDOT is Powers Boulevard is a $6 to $10 million project that it doesn't look like we're going to have any funds from any other sources. And so that's one of the things we'll be hopefully pursuing with CDOT is to get a $10 million chunk of that, which is 5% of the first year, and try to get that Powers Boulevard project widened per the wing, State of the Wing project.
Yeah, so again, that's $200 million projected per year for 5 years. We don't know exactly what portion of that would. Those would be remained at statewide projects, not allocated to the MPO. So, and then secondly, the kind of a really welcome thing is tomorrow it'll be a statewide stack retreat with an attempt is to improve the relationship with the regional governments, the MPOs, by inviting to stack members, primaries, to an off-site setting where they can discuss how to work better together. So a very, very positive step, I think, by CDOT. Much appreciated. So, I don't know, Craig, you've got other things to add to Wayne?
And that's for the
Wayne is going to be there half day, either the full day tomorrow. It's up in Denver.
So if Wayne is elected to Secretary of State, will he continue on in this role, or he'll move off, he said? Okay.
No, I understand his intention is to withdraw his name for consideration as a stack rep from this board. So at that point, this board would have to elect its next primary stack representative.
Does the board elect their own officers, the stack?
It does.
It does.
The
So is it Vince Rogowski or whatever? He's been chair for...
from Mountain District is our current chair. He was reelected as the stack chair for the next year. Thad Knoll was elected as vice chair.
To Summit County?
Summit County.
He's actually next to City of Colorado Springs. So I've known Thad for 11 years or so. He used to work for City of Colorado Springs, moved out to the mountains, and now he's the vice chair. So
A long-time service on the stack, probably 10 years or so.
Will the stack be participating in the 228 discussions and how that money is
Well,
going to be
it's-
spent, or?
It's informational on the stack agenda. I
Yeah.
presume it'll be, the idea is there's interaction between stack and CDOT staff.
Okay. Well, thank you for that update, and thanks for giving up your, was it Friday, you say?
Thursday for the treaty, then Friday for the stack meeting.
So
Friday
both
morning.
days, okay. Good. I hope we're going to get a room up there, or are you going to do the trip?
That's the plan.
All right, good. Well, enjoy yourself up there. Great, thank you. All right, one more item, unless somebody has a question about the stack for Norm, then the annual evaluation, PPACG Executive Director, and I can't emphasize how important it is to fill these out and give some really good feedback to Rob and get these into Barb. Do we have a date that we would like to have these back?
She did.
And,
September 30th.
so we have till the end of the month to get these in. And really, folks, if you can, take some time to really weigh in on that. It's very helpful, and I think we get a better director for the process. So pass that on to anybody who had to leave early. That would be much appreciated. Yes.
Well, that's a question for Rob, actually. Can we do these electronically online, or?
Sure, they're in the board packet electronically. I don't know if you can fill them out.
Okay.
Can you check with Barb, see if you can send it out already?
Okay, that's probably.
Bypasses me, otherwise I'm tempted to edit.
Yeah, right. That's probably a good thing. But yeah, that's a great idea. If you can get Barb to send them out in a returnable form, that would probably make a...
Non-PDF, so you can fill them out.
Okay. And then finally, we have member entity announcements. The Waters of the U.S. letter to the EPA. I guess that's technically coming from El Paso County, or is it all three counties? Or why is it under member entity announcements then?
Oh, just a place to share with all of you.
Okay.
Did
Why
we
not?
Did we send it? We sent it.
Well, I think it's signed off by Dennis, right?
As the chair.
Right, okay. Well,
Thanks to Cary County government.
right, great.
We're all in that boat.
Okay, any further business? Anybody? I see the RTA folks are already coming in the house, so we need to get going.
I just wanted to make one.
Please.
I'm just really proud of the county. We're very concerned about smoke, and since we've gone through the process, and we're going to formalize that after going on the 23rd, stand up a regional task force to focus on military affairs related issues. We have so many different organizations within this community that help out in different areas with regard to the military and supporting that, our installations. And what we're trying to do is create an umbrella structure, county-led task force. I'm going to head that up. But we want to be able to make sure that we have a working relationship so that we can receive information so that we as policymakers can help almost create a legislative agenda. When you think about encroachment issues, when you think about policies that impact potential BRAC decisions, whether it's marijuana, you name it, whatever it's going to be, we need to have a discussion and we need to have a forum so that we can debate those topics. We also need a central point so that whether we're interfacing with the state or the legislative delegation, where we can rapidly receive and disseminate information. So we're going to start that up. We did send out an email, so hopefully you've received that, but we're inviting everybody to participate in this process. And again, we're really excited about it, but when you examine what other communities are doing across the country, we are behind, so we are quickly trying to close the gap. We wanted to do something prior to our trip to D.C., but I just want to let everybody know that you're welcome to participate, and we really look forward to seeing you. Our first meeting is going to be September 23rd from 3 to 5 at Centennial Hall, and at that first meeting, we'll kind of outline roles and responsibilities, but I just wanted to get something going before we went to D.C.
Great, thank you. That sounds very much needed for this region. So, any other member entity announcements? And our next meeting is?
October 8th.
October 8th. So, see you then. We are adjourned. Thank you. And Rob, did you want me to sign this? Is that Dennis's name on there?